Graduates gathered near the school. The guys took pictures, rejoiced at graduation from high school. Han Disong was walking with his friend. Suddenly, his body lit up with a blue light, and his soul separated from his body. On this ordinary day, the young man fell into hell. There was no day or night, not even sunlight. The guy had been in hell for about 10 days and it was hard to survive. All that could be eaten was the rotting meat left behind by the monsters. Disong found the remains of the animal and began to eat it. A large green creature appeared behind him and was about to attack. The young man managed to react to the appearance of the monster, so he jumped away from him and launched the first stone at the monster. He continued to fight back with stones and the creature escaped. As the days passed, Disong had to give up his humanity in order to survive. He was able to learn to exist in hell. 51 days have passed since the guy appeared in this place. The young man was sitting in a cave and roasting meat on a fire. A notification from the system appeared in front of him, which said that the player's level had been raised to the 3rd level. Thinking that he had gone crazy, Disong still accepted the notification. After that, his abilities increased noticeably. 7 years later, the young man has upgraded his level and skills. He learned how to fight monsters and most of the worms died from a single blow. It's been a long time since that day. At the age of 24, Disong was able to make a sword from the ore obtained from the Steel Knight. With this sword, 51 years later, the young man beheaded a pathetic reincarnation. In 79, Disong went to the Demon King, the one who dragged the guy to hell. There was chaos all around. Wounded monsters lay everywhere. Everything was on fire. Disong was fighting with the creatures when the Demon King's gatekeeper appeared in front of him. This creature was several times bigger than the guy, but he does not intend to give up. Disong held his sword out in front of him and told the monster to open the gate if he wanted to survive. Calling the young man an arrogant fool, the gatekeeper of the Demon King strikes and throws Disong forward a few meters. The young man does not give up. He gets up from the ground and flies to attack. Striking a blow, the guy flies away from the creature. The system says that it was necessary to kill him immediately. Disong watches the monster's further actions and he becomes enraged. The gatekeeper says that he will not leave it just like that and will strike back. Having said this, the monster falls silent and a through hole appears in his chest. Disong launched his sword at him, so he was able to defeat the monster. The creature falls to the ground, and the system says that now the Demon King will definitely get angry, because the young man even killed the guardian of the gate. The guy shrugs off these words and grins, saying that he understands the whole situation. The system decides to ask Disong if he is sure that he wants to kill the Demon King and become the absolute ruler of hell. The guy replies that he is not interested and the skull asks why then he is fighting against the Demon King. Disong replies that it's been 80 years since he went to hell. He fought monsters to survive. They were all serious and all have different stories and reasons why they got into this hell. Therefore, Disong has a question. Why is he in this hell, and why did the Demon King bring him to this hell? The skull, upon hearing this, suggests that he could have asked the Demon King politely about it. Also, the skull advises Disong on his knees to ask for forgiveness. Thinking that questions are all the young man wants, the system asks what he is going to do. Disong replies that the price must be paid. The price for dragging a young man into hell and making him suffer. The guy stands in front of the Demon King's castle and prepares to go there to punish him for everything. Disong takes off, but before he can reach the king, he wakes up in a hospital room. Disong doesn't understand why he ended up in the hospital and tries to move. His body does not move, and the young man is very scared of this. His mother comes into the ward with a tray in her hands and, seeing her son awake, drops the tray on the floor. The woman runs up to her son and starts hugging him, and the young man does not understand why the dream is so realistic. Then Disong remembers how he killed the Demon King. That day, the skull told the young man that he was now the absolute ruler of hell, and after these words, a notification from the system appeared. The sign said if Disong was ready to return to Earth. The young man wondered if he was ready to return to Earth, because 80 years have passed since he went to hell. Every day he prayed to be free of this cursed place. Therefore, the guy agrees without a doubt. The doctors gathered at Han Disong's bedside to check on the patient's condition. After an examination, the doctor says that the young man has been in a vegetative state for a long time, so at first it will be difficult for him to start moving. But the doctor reassures the patient's mother, saying that if he continues to receive rehabilitation treatment, he will get better. Unexpectedly for everyone, Disong starts screaming heart-rendingly. The young man does not understand when he moved into reality when he received a notification from the system. The children who are in the ward with Disong are frightened by the behavior of the young man and cling to their mother. The doctor runs up to the patient to calm him down, But the guy does not intend to get help, so he bites the doctor's hand until it bleeds. The young man asks the doctor what he did to him, whether it was magic or a paralyzing poison. The guy falls out of bed and continues to shout that he has lived 80 years of struggle and suffering, so he does not intend to die peacefully after all he has experienced. Even when he was dying in the lifeless land of hell, he begged and begged. 2 orderlies run into the ward and grab the guy from both sides under the arms. The young man tries to escape and threatens violence. Suddenly, a yellow light catches his attention and Disong looks out the window. He looks up at the sky and does not understand why there is a wormhole here. They put Disong on the bed, and the orderlies hold him so that the young man does not run away again. The guy tries to get rid of someone else's hands, but a drug is injected into his neck. Disong's body has gone limp, and he is falling asleep. A man on the news announces that at about 9 o'clock in the morning over Songpaku, in Seoul, the gate was opened. A team of hunters who were responsible for those surroundings was quickly dispatched to the scene. The street was in chaos. Everywhere lay the bodies of monsters, fragments of buildings. Hunters fought with creatures. The news anchor appeals to the hunters to report on the situation on the streets of Seoul. One of the hunters tells the head that the mission is currently in the final stage of suppression. Under these words, the man plunges a sword into the monster's head. The head asks how long the operation can take. The man replies that, judging by the success of the mission, it may take only an hour. The head is responsible so that after the completion of the mission, he is informed about it. The man will take care of the rest himself. The main thing is that the hunters complete the mission successfully. The hunter accepts the order, and the head puts the phone in the inside pocket of his jacket. The news anchor announces that thanks to the prompt response of the hunter team, the consequences of the gate were quickly eliminated, and then the gate itself was closed. Han Disong opened his eyes and the first thought that crossed his mind was a wormhole. He thought about the fact that there was a team of hunters in it. The head of the hunters enters the chamber and greets the young man. Disong doesn't recognize the man, but after looking at the man's face, he recognized him as Chang Ho. The man asks the patient about his well-being, and the man replies that he is all right. Jang Ho rejoices that Disong has finally come to his senses after 10 long years, after Ima fell then. Hearing this, Disong remembers that very day, graduation from high school. Chang Ho says that on that day the young man was full of strength and energy, but suddenly fell and since then he has been lying in a coma in a hospital bed for 10 years. Thoughts appeared in Disong's head that while he was in hell, it seemed to him that all 80 years had passed, but in reality only 10 years had passed. Young Ho says that during all this time, his mother worked very hard. Due to hospital expenses, she had to get 2 jobs. But Young Ho is in a hurry to calm his friend down, saying that the most important thing now is for Disong to recover as soon as possible and return to his former form. Also, the head of hunters reports that the patient cannot worry about work. Chang Ho left him one free place. Disong and his mom went out for a walk. The woman was taking her son on a gurney and talking about the good weather. The man practically did not listen to her. He was thinking about what was happening to him while he was in hell. There he fought for a chance to return to his body and survive. But here, he has to take responsibility for his family and help. But at the moment, he can't walk on his own and it can bring a lot of trouble. And also Disong can become a heavy burden for the family. When the man concluded that in reality there is no less cruelty than in hell, 2 men appear in front of them. One of them had a scar on half of his face, and the other turned to Disong's mom, calling her auntie. The man with the scar asks the woman why they couldn't get through to her. Is she not going to return the money she borrowed? Mom begins to tremble with fear and says that by next month she will prepare the money. The man replies that the woman tells him about it every month and he is tired of listening to these promises. The woman approaches the bandit and taking his hand begins to beg him to give her another month, and this time she will definitely prepare the money. The man did not like this gesture. He violently pulls out his hand and shouts that she should not touch him. He tells Disong's mom that if she borrowed money, she needs to return it on time. The bandit added that this time they would not talk to her in a good way. Tears accumulate in mom's eyes, and she asks not to do this in front of her child. She makes a promise that in the next one she will definitely return the required amount and asks them to let them go. The collector points to the hand, depicting that there is little time left. 2 years have passed, and the woman still has not repaid the debt. Deciding that if he hits her, the woman will listen to him, the man hits her in the face. Seeing this, Han Disong becomes enraged, calling the 2 men a brat. Collectors grin, and mom asks her son not to say so. A man with a scar on his face walks up to Disong and grabs him by the neck, lifting him off the ground. Mom cries and asks her son to apologize to the men. The woman says that her son is not to blame for this situation, because he is a simple patient, so the mother asks the man to let the young man go. The collector does not agree with these words, because all the money went to the treatment of Daesun. The young man grins and asks what they are going to do to him in this case, calling them insects. A grin appears on the bandit's face. He calls the guy impudent and says that he has big problems with his head, since Daesun decided to continue to get into the conflict. The man also says that Daesun really looks like an insect from them. After all, at the moment he is not able to walk, only move his mouth helplessly. Having said that, the collector throws the young man to the ground, and he flies away a few meters. The man approaches the patient and continues to strike. When the thought comes to the young man's head that if they were in hell now, he could quickly deal with him, a notification from the system appears. The sign says that the divine quest is about to begin and an offer to join it. The words were written below that in case of refusal of the quest, the reward will not be received. After the window with the choice suddenly appeared, Daesung's doubts were short-lived. After all, these windows were the only thing that helped him survive all these 80 years in hell. All the people around the young man froze and the world turned gray. The young man understands that this happened because he received a task. A notification from the system appears in front of him again, in which detailed information about the task is written. In one of the items it was written about the reward. For a successfully completed task, the young man will receive a medicine to restore the perfect state. A red triangle appears in front of Daesung with the inscription 10 meters at the top. The guy realizes that if he gets to the object, he will receive a reward. He decides that he will get there even by crawling, if only he will be returned to his former state. The guy starts to crawl on the ground, but it's hard for him. Daesung believes that he can't handle such a small thing when he conquered everyone in hell. At this speed, it is impossible to get to the triangle in the allotted time. The patient understands. He looks up at the message from the system and sees that there are 17 minutes left before the task is completed. Daesung decides to think rationally and, after reading the line on which the goal was written, to get to the destination. The young man understands that it is not necessary to reach the subject. It is important to move in any way. The patient begins to examine the objects that surrounded him and sees the stroller on which his mother was taking him. He crawls to the gurney and starts climbing on it. It's hard for the young man, but he was able to get on the wheelchair. In the last seconds, Daesung gets to the red triangle and a potion drops out to him. Immediately after the young man drank the medicine, all his strength returned to him and the pain disappeared. The next second, the world stops being gray and people come to life. A man with a scar looks around in an attempt to find a young man. Security guards come to the scene to stop the criminals. Mom notices her son and runs to him to find out how the young man feels. The collector looks angrily in the direction of Daesun, and the other asks him to leave here. The sun has already set over the horizon, and Daesung is talking about that window with a choice. He tried to summon him again several times, but there were no results, so the young man decided to give up. While the patient is lying on the bed, the realization comes to him that he needs to restore his body as soon as possible before those collectors come again. When Daesung decides to create a quest for himself, a notification appears stating that the pantheon is expecting a visit from perfection. The young man's eyes widen. He does not understand what it was. Meanwhile, the guy is transferred to the pantheon and a notification from the system appears in front of him again. The message says that a virtual avatar was created based on the information in the diaries. From this moment on, it is possible to accelerate its implementation by completing tasks. When the young man realized that what was happening was not like a dream, information about a new task appeared in front of him. Daesung needs to destroy the facility. For the completed task, he will receive a memory card for perfection. A huge blue head with protruding fangs from its mouth appears near the young man. Daesung exhales deeply and strikes, thereby destroying the specified object. After that, a new notification appears with the task. He needs to run 10 kilometers in 3 hours. As a reward, the young man will receive a medium-sized tonic for perfection. After completing the quest, a new one appears, which says that the guy needs to do 1,000 sets of push-ups in 2 hours. For this, he will receive a tonic. After making 55% of the required amount, Daesun begins to get angry at these tasks, and asks the system for a normal task. When the young man said this, a notification appears with a new quest. It is necessary to fight with the selected object and defeat it in an indefinite time. The next second, a huge creature called a crying demon appears in front of Daesung. In hell, the young man almost died because of him, but now he is glad to see this creature. The crying demon lands many blows on Daesung, but he manages to dodge. When the young man decides to strike back, the demon throws him away from himself. The guy lands on his feet and decides that being knocked down by a crying monster is humiliating. The demon continues to attack the young man, and he dodges the blows. At one point, the monster grabs Daesung, and then the young man remembers how he once dealt with a demon in hell. Rage appears in the guy's eyes and he manages to cut the demon's hand with a sword. Daesung remembered that he could summon a sword and thus he was able to get out of the clutches of a crying demon. The monster raises his wounded arm and begins to scream in pain. At this second, the young man rushes at the monster and defeats him, sending him to hell. After that, a message appears from the system stating that the mission has been completed. The next morning, Daesung's mom wakes up to the noise in the ward. She opens her eyes and directs her gaze towards the window. In front of her, she sees her son, who looked much healthier than yesterday. His body gained a healthy look and muscles, and his face did not look haggard. The patient was sent to the doctor for examination. While they were checking the working capacity of his limbs, Mom was talking to the doctor. The woman does not believe this, because at the last examination, the doctor said that rehabilitation would take more than 6 months. Why did Daesung start moving as usual in just 15 days? The doctor replies that he can't say anything at the moment. From a medical point of view, the patient's condition is inexplicable. Also, in order to calm the patient's mother, the doctor added that some peculiarities are usually revealed, so there is no need to worry about it. After a long examination, Daesung gets angry and asks the doctor to stop touching him. The man recoiled from the patient and, apologizing, said that such a sharp improvement in the condition was amazing. When the examination was over, Daesung strolled through the corridors of the hospital, stretching his arms. Behind him, he heard the voice of his mother, who was talking to a nurse. Mom, taking the girl by the hand, said words of gratitude. The nurse, in turn, replies that what she has done is not worth anything compared to what the woman has been through over the past 10 years. After hearing this conversation, the young man realized how hard it had been for his mother lately. Daesung clenches his fists and decides that from now on he will protect his mom. Daesung enters the men's room and goes to the pantheon. Once in place, he asks if it is possible to finish the implementation as soon as possible. A notification appears stating that in this arbitrary task, the young man can choose the level of difficulty at his discretion. The guy is serious, and he decides that whatever it is necessary to end it the first time. Therefore, Daesung chooses the difficulty level Hell. After that, a black ball with red cracks and a glow inside appears in front of him. The next second, the doppelganger hand Daesung appears from the ball. The dark side of the young man is coming at Daesung to strike. The opponent flies up to the young man, but he manages to push him away from himself. The doppelganger deals several more attacks. In the next second, Daesung is wounded. At that moment, the guy realized that he would not be able to defeat him either in strength or speed in his current state. The young man understands that the longer they fight, the more unprofitable it will be for him. The opponent runs up to Daesung and, stretching out his arm, strikes, thereby throwing the young man several meters away. Smoke appears around the guy, and he gets to his feet. The young man grins at the fact that the fake is many times stronger than himself. But Daesung does not intend to give up, so, raising his head, he says that today the dark side will die at his hands. In the next second, Daesung summons Bloodseeker's Wrath. His eyes turn red, and a burgundy flame appears around his body. Seeing this, the enemy was taken aback for a moment, so he decided to attack. He strikes with his sword, but the weapon passes through Daesung's body. The young man takes the doppelganger by the head and presses him to the ground. He sits on top of the opponent and raises his sword to strike, but the dark side manages to slip out of his hands. Daesung turns his head in the direction of the opponent and realizes that he is also using the anger of the Bloodseeker. Daesung runs up to the enemy to attack, but does not have time. The opponent is behind him and plunges the sword into the young man's back. The next second, the guy is in reality. He is also standing in the toilet, but now his body is shaking from lack of vitality. Worried that the door is closed, the cleaner takes out the keys and starts opening the door. Daesung realizes that if he loses, then everything he has accumulated during this time will turn into nothing. Therefore, he needs to come up with something to kill his dark side. When this thought comes to him, the young man remembers about the inventory. Another cleaner enters the toilet and tells Aunt Kim that her name was on the 3rd floor. The woman pulls the keys out of the keyhole and leaves the toilet. At this moment, Daesung in the pantheon opens his inventory. The young man stretches his hand into the blue hole and from there the potion that he received for each completed task. It has been lying idle in his inventory all the time, but now it is what he needs. This is a medicine that will help increase endurance by 20%. If that's the case, then after drinking 5 vials, he will be able to fight properly. Daesung drinks the medicine and his wounds begin to heal. The young man runs up to the opponent and strikes. This time he manages to bring down the dark side, but the backlash is not long in coming. The guy takes out 2 more bottles of medicine and drinks them. Even though stamina is being restored, fighting is still difficult. Using 5 bottles of medicine, Disung tries to repel attacks. The doppelganger flies up to the young man and grabs him by the neck. The doppelganger raises his sword to stab him in the stomach, and at that moment Disung summons an inventory that appears in front of his stomach. The dark side thrusts the sword into the blue hole, and the young man strikes the opponent with the sword. The guy successfully completes the task and a notification appears from the system, which states that after the final restoration of the body in the real world, the young man will still be able to use the hell system. After this message, Disung returns to his former body with scars. He is glad that he managed to regain his strength, but these scars remind him of hard times in hell. The young man asks the system to return him outside. But before that, a notification about an unread message appears. Disung opens it and starts reading. The message says that hell welcomes its new sovereign, Han Disung. Since the sovereign has chosen to return to Earth during his absence, the celestial space will be sealed. The demons of the pantheon will be waiting for the arrival of their sovereign. After reading this message, Disung realized that they needed help. But the young man does not intend to help them after 80 years of suffering from them, just because he became their sovereign. The guy shows the middle finger and again asks the system to let him out of here. Disung is still in the hospital. He stands on one hand in his ward and does push-ups, the score of which exceeds 50 times. The door to the ward was open, so Mom and the doctor were watching what was happening. The doctor reports that Disung is awakened. The woman recalls the doctor's words that her son is not like them. The man hurries to calm the young man's mother, saying that at the moment there are no specific symptoms of awakening, so there is no need to worry too much, but still it is impossible otherwise. The woman does not understand how this could happen to her son. The doctor replies that this is all they can do to help. The association should take care of the rest. Disung's mom thanks the doctor for the help. Disung and his mom are riding in a taxi, and the young man begins to talk about what he heard. He tried to pretend that he didn't notice anything, worrying about the task, but the guy understands that it can't be left so easily. Realizing that Mom is hiding something, a question appears in his head. He is wondering what has happened in 10 years of his absence. When they get home, Mom tells her son to rest while she's gone. Disung goes into the house and sees a girl who is sitting on the floor by the box with money in her hands. When she sees the young man, she gets up and looks at the guy in surprise. Returning, the mother approaches her son and asks what he wants to eat. She sees Jisa in front of her and asks her daughter where she has been. The girl did not answer the phone while her mother was worried about her daughter. Hearing the girl's name, Disung's eyes widen in surprise. The woman pays attention to an empty open box and realizes that her daughter has taken the money again. The girl shyly lowers her eyes to the floor and puts her hands in her pockets. The young man swears at himself for not recognizing his own sister. The girl tells her brother in a serious voice that he looks healthy, while in his absence every day was like hell. The upset girl is about to leave the house when the voice of those 2 collectors is heard outside the gate. One of them knocks on the door with his foot and threatens that if the woman does not open, then he will break down this door into the light of 3. The men continue to knock loudly with their feet on the iron door. When they began to doubt that this was really the woman's house, Jisoo came out from there. After giving them an evil look and unpleasant words, the girl left, and the men assumed that this was the debtor's daughter. Collectors entered the territory of the house, asking why the woman did not open the door, because she was at home. Disung's mom ran up to the men apologizing for it. She explained that she couldn't call them as soon as they were discharged from the hospital today. The woman begins to take out bills from her wallet, saying that this is all she has at the moment. The man throws the wallet aside. His voice breaks into a rude shout, and he says that they did not come here for this paltry sum. The next second he hits the woman and she falls to the ground. Seeing this, Disung becomes enraged. He approaches the bandit and strikes back. The man falls to the ground and his friend runs up to him to help. Disung approaches them and the man with the scar on his face does not recognize him as the wheelchair user. The young man says that he wanted to meet them himself, but they came here by themselves. The guy comes closer to them and asks them if they know how he managed to survive in hell. When the man took Disung's words for nonsense, the young man grabbed the bandit by the face and replied that he always returns everything to those from whom he got. At this second, the guy strikes the man's face. The collector falls to the ground, and Disung orders him to get up, because he did not repay the entire debt. The man notices a wooden chair and, grabbing it, is going to throw it at the guy. But he fails to do this. The young man punches the chair with his hand and strikes another blow on the bandit's face. Seeing this, his friend gets up from the ground and pulls out a knife. He keeps his distance from the young man, but brandishes a knife in an attempt to strike. Disong grabs the man by the hand and, remembering that the last time the bandit hit his mother with this hand, the young man breaks the man's limb. A man with a scar on his face comes to his senses and asks the young man if he will be able to live in peace after that. Disong, with a grin on his face, approaches the man and, taking him by the collar of his shirt, says that there is one way in such cases: kill so that there are no leftovers. Suddenly the mother screams. She begs her son to stop it. When the young man is distracted by his mother's words, the bandits manage to escape from their house. They reach their car, and when the bandit with a wounded arm gets behind the wheel, they begin to discuss the disabled guy who was in the hospital last time. They don't understand how a person who has been in a coma for 10 years could change so quickly. Men are at a loss. They don't know what to do now. The boss told them to get at least a receipt from that woman. The man with the scar on his face replies that it doesn't matter anymore and they need to figure out a way to get a receipt. He looks out the window and sees Jisa, then asks his colleague to stop the car. Meanwhile, Mom tells her son about what happened over the past 10 years. When Disong fell, the woman walked around a huge number of hospitals, not knowing what happened to him. Then she sold the house and left their shop. Mom thought that her son would recover quickly, but in the end, all the money they had flew away. On the recommendation of a friend, the woman received a loan in the financial sector, but it was not easy to repay the debt. Not only the amount on the loan was growing, but also the interest on it. Disong decides to ask about his sister. He asks if Jisoo goes to school and why she has such an appearance. Mom replies that the girl dropped out the year before last. Last year, a woman injured herself while working at a diner and Jisoo said she would help. Disong's sister is also suffering. During the day she works at a gas station, but at night she goes to work in a store. The young man says that it was necessary to stop her, because Jisoo has to study at school. The woman replies that she stopped, but it was necessary to follow her son. The guy replies that he should have left him. Mom asks her son not to say that, because they are a family. The phone rings, interrupting their conversation. The woman picks up the phone and says that these are the people. Disong takes the phone from his mother and asks the men what they are calling for. After their answer, the young man becomes enraged. Men ride in a car with Jisoo. The girl's hands and feet are tied, and her mouth is sealed with duct tape. A collector with a scar on his face tells Disong that the young man has a day to find 100 million. Looking at his skills, this task will not be difficult for him, the man adds. The bandit told Disong not to do anything extra if he wanted his sister to stay alive. The guy hangs up and squeezes the phone in his hands. Worried by the expression on her son's face, Mom asks him why these people called and what they want. The young man is about to leave, informing the woman that he will be back soon. The woman stops her son and tells him that if it is something dangerous, then he does not need to go there. If the son goes to prison after hurting someone, the woman will not be able to live after that. A notification from the system appears in front of the guy. Disong turns his head in the direction of Mom and asks her not to worry. On the sign it was written about the adaptation of the returned. The young man will receive a bonus as a reward, the release of basic skills. Disong reads the message and says that if they were going to give something like this, they should have done it faster. Various skills appear in front of the guy and after quickly learning them, he makes a choice. Two men enter the building with Jisoo. One of them hopes that Disong will not come here, and the man with the scar on his face replies that even if he comes, they still have the hostage. They enter the elevator and light flashes appear in the room. The man does not understand what is happening, but turning his head to the left, he notices Disong. The guy was wearing a black robe, and his eyes shone with a purple light. Seeing the young man, the bandit gets scared and asks what he is doing here. Disong grins and replies that he himself asked to bring money, so the young man is here. Of all the skills presented, the young man chose the Shadow Caster. When he clicked on the desired skill, a black liquid appeared in his hand, which was highlighted in blue. The young man summons a Shadow Caster, and the muck turns into the outline of a person. Disong tears a piece of cloth from his hoodie and orders the shadow to track this man by blood and open the way to him. Hands appear from the blue flame and take a piece of cloth. The second man attacks Disong's doppelganger. The guy dodges the blow and grabs the man by the face. Then the young man slams the man's head into the wall. Seeing this, the collector with the scar gets confused and asks Disong if he is awake. The doppelganger does not understand what the person is talking about, and when she heard about it, horror and panic appeared in Jisoo's eyes. The next minute, the elevator stops, and the man runs out of it with the words that their guest is awakened, so you need to deal with him. After these words, Disong strikes, and the man falls to the ground. People who are ready to attack the young man appear in the corridor. The guy quickly gets out of the elevator and the men try to attack the guy. They don't succeed because Disong is many times faster than them. The young man quickly defeats all opponents and after a few minutes they are lying on the floor unconscious. Disong goes into the elevator to his sister and, removing the tape from her mouth, asks about her well-being. The guy tells his sister to go home, and the girl asks why he doesn't go with her. The young man stops and replies that he needs to see something. The young man steps over the bodies of the men and goes on to his goal. After going further, Disong approaches the steps. He goes up and is noticed by other bandits. The guy scratches the back of his head and says that these people are like fleas. They only know how to chat and annoy people. The next second, one of the bandits flies out of the window of the building. A pumped-up man with a lot of tattoos is sitting in the bathhouse. The phone rings and he picks up the phone irritably. The man gets angry and reminds that he said not to bother him when he is steaming. The voice from the phone says that they have big problems, so the man needs to return to the office urgently. He becomes enraged, and his interlocutor adds that the matter is urgent and it is necessary to come as soon as possible. The man's eye starts twitching, and he squeezes the phone in his hand, which is why it crumbles into small pieces. In the office, the bodies of unconscious men lie in the corridors. There are numerous wounds on their bodies and their clothes are stained with blood. Disong enters the office, where a man, sitting on the floor and pressing against the table, is trembling with fear. The next second, the wall in the office crumbles and a man with tattoos appears from there. He grabs Disong by the head and presses him to the floor. The young man tears a piece of cloth from the man's jacket and manages to get out. The guy shakes off his hands and asks the man if he is awake. A sinister grin only appears on his face, and the man replies that there is no need to regret and he will send the young man to hell. The man's body is rapidly increasing and the jacket on his body is torn and pieces of fabric fly off in different directions. But before he can strike, he gets punched in the face. Disong says that if a man undresses, it will not hurt him less. After this blow, the bandit flies to the other end of the office. Disong walks up to the man and slams him into the wall with his foot. The young man says that the bandit knows nothing about hell. When a guy says that his family has suffered during his absence, a man thinks that this guy is from a completely different category and he needs to survive. The bandit stretches out his hand and asks Disong to stop. The man says he will give him anything, even money. Hearing about this, the young man asks where the money is. The bandit points his finger at the safe in the office. Disong turns his head towards the safe and walks towards it. When the young man turns away, the man gets up from the floor and runs away. The guy approaches the man who has been hiding behind the table all this time and was trembling with fear. Disong tells him that he will not leave now and will also get what he deserves. A tattooed thug sits in his car and promises himself to kill the whole family of this guy. Suddenly, he hears a familiar voice behind him. He says that the man forgot to say the code to the safe. After looking in the mirror and seeing Disong there, the bandit is horrified. Dark hands wrap around the bandit's face, and the young man says that what is important now is that he can know where the man is, and at any moment the guy can find him. The next moment, the bandit's car begins to shake. The screams of its owner can be heard from it. Disong is standing on the roof of a building and money is falling from a black portal to the ground. The young man goes down and after counting the money, thinks about how long you can live on 500,003,201. He smiles and wonders about buying an apartment in Seoul. After a while, Disong went to get a new phone. The store offered him a new model of a folding phone for 2,990,000 won. The young man picks up another pink phone and asks about it. The seller says that this is also a new model that is in good demand among girls. The man calls the price of the phone, 1,990,000 won. When a store employee noticed how the young man was thinking, the man thought that he was too persistent and decided to offer the customer an installment plan. But Disong decided to buy both of the proposed phones. The seller is happy about this and, having packed 2 phones, wishes the buyer a good day and thanks him for the purchase. The guy returns home and puts the shopping bag on the computer table. Mom calls her son to the table, and the young man replies that he needs to go out. A woman enters her son's room and asks where he is going. But when she enters the room, she sees that Disong was no longer there. It got dark outside, and Disong went to dinner with Young-ho. A guy walks into a restaurant, and a friend waves his hand, beckoning him to himself. The friends start drinking and having dinner, and Young-ho asks Disong if he has decided what he will do next. The young man replies that he does not know. Young-ho, in an attempt to reason with a friend, says that they are no longer stupid schoolchildren. Disong decides to ask a friend how many floors he can buy in a house for 500 million. Young-ho replies that for this amount you can find an apartment with such a deposit somewhere outside Seoul. Disung looks up at his friend in surprise and asks how much apartments in Seoul cost. Young-ho answers him that the average cost of an apartment reaches 2 billion won. The frustrated young man lowers his head, and Young-ho laughs. He says that the world changed a long time ago while the guy was in a coma. Disung drinks another shot, and Young-ho says that his mom told him that Disung woke up. The friend says that he will be able to answer this question only when he learns what awakening is. Young-ho laughs and remembers that Disung couldn't have known about it even if he woke up. After a while, the friends go outside and Young-ho lights up. He tells a friend that some time has passed since he fell into a coma, and then various portals began to appear. At first, the authorities ordered to investigate this unusual phenomenon. At one point, these portals began to crack and monsters began to appear from there. They started attacking people. Even the strongest weapons did not take them. So they realized that they were not affected by human weapons, and the number of victims increased each time. Disung asks about weapons, whether none really can kill a monster. Jeong-ho replies that it can be assumed that none of the weapons they are used to does not work on them. As time passed, they realized that they could only be affected by the aura weapon made from the biomaterial of the monsters themselves. But such weapons can only be used by the awakened, such as Disung, and Young-ho points at a friend with a cigarette between his fingers. The young man thinks about waking up and opens his smartphone to find information about it. Young-ho notices a friend's new phone and Disung replied that it was a new model. The guy grins and says that this model is outdated and now it can be taken for a song. Hearing these words, Disung gets very upset. Young-ho continues to talk about the abilities of the awakened. One of them is that they can strengthen their body through aura control, even without using weapons. The guy remembers that Disung quickly recovered his body and also that the young man recently beat the goons. Disung makes a thoughtful face and asks if money is paid if he becomes awakened. The friend is surprised by these words and asks if Disung is serious. The guy replies that he is not joking and asks how much you can earn on this. Their dialogue is interrupted by a sudden noise. Friends look up into the sky and see the portal that has opened. Monsters start coming out of there, and people around run for cover. A crowd of monsters is rapidly coming out of the portal. In the hands of the creatures hold bats, axes, and other various weapons. The screams of frightened people who tried to escape from the scene can be heard around. Disung and Young-ho don't understand why the portal has opened right now. Disung noticed that these monsters were different from those in hell. The young man picks up a stone from the asphalt and decides to fight them. He launches a stone at one of the monsters, and Jeong-ho reminds them that no weapon will work on them now. The guy shrugs off the words of his friend, and the creature pays attention to Disung and runs in his direction. The monster raises his weapon to strike, and Young-ho closes his eyes, resigned to the impending death. But this does not happen, because Disung blows the monster's head off and says that they can be dealt with bare hands. Disung continues to kill monsters, and Jeong-ho assumes that his friend has become awakened above level B when people's screams are heard behind him. Jeong-ho realizes that there is no time to think. Monsters sat on buildings and inspired people with fear and panic. When Young-ho saw this, he shouted that he knew a safe place and asked to follow him. People start following the guy, but monsters appear in front of them. Everyone freezes, realizing that they are all about to be killed. The creatures begin to rapidly attack people. They wound them and knock them down. In the crowd of people there was a little girl who, seeing a big monster in front of her, froze in place from fear. The monster raises a baton to strike, but Jeong-ho manages to save the child. He covers it with his body and falls to the ground. The next second, Disung appears and kills this monster. Seeing a friend, Young-ho is very happy about his appearance. The young man continues to fight with the creatures, and Jeong-ho tells the people to move towards the riverbed as quickly as possible. Not far from the scene of the incident, a guy from a restaurant was conducting a live broadcast. He filmed Disung fighting monsters alone. People wrote enthusiastic comments dedicated to the young man. At one point, the young man does not have time to react and is hit by one of the monsters. The kid from the restaurant started shouting for the young man to move faster, but these words do not help Disung in any way. The creature hits the young man, and he flies away a few meters crashing into the car. Meanwhile, Jeong-ho went down to the sewer to the rest of the people and returned the missing girl to her mother. Tears gathered in the woman's eyes, and she rushed to Haeun, asking for her forgiveness. The child was crying too, and the girl ran up to her mother to hug her. Young-ho was watching this scene with a smile on his face when one of the men asked him if he was really going to go back upstairs. Disung is sitting on the ground near the car with his head down. Monsters approach him to make sure that the person is dead. The guy who conducted the live broadcast realized that the young man was in great danger, and the viewers of the broadcast had already buried Disung. One of the monsters raises his hand with a weapon up and strikes. The kid from the restaurant closes his eyes with his palm so as not to witness someone's death. Raising his baton, the monster does not find a person there. Disung flies up to the monster from behind and blows his head off. The guy who led the live broadcast screams to his viewers that young man survived. While Disung continued to kill monsters, the audience began to complain that the shooting was being carried out too far from the scene. The guy refuses to come closer because he doesn't want to die. Suddenly, the guy receives a donation of 5 million won. A message was signed at the bottom that if the guy took a closer picture of Disung, he would send another 5 million. The guy thinks about the amount of money he can earn for this broadcast, but he's scared. He doesn't understand how he can get closer and stay alive. Deesun is rapidly killing monsters, and the guy receives another transfer from another person again in 5 million with the message that he will be sent more money for taking off the face of the monster killer closer. Then another message comes saying that if the guy finds more information about Deesung, he will get even more money. The kid started receiving deposits from viewers and one of them transferred 20 million won to the guy. The viewer offered another 40 million for filming Deesung's face and providing detailed information about him. They should communicate by notes. Two men are sitting in the office and watching the broadcast of the guy from the restaurant. One of them said that he did as the head ordered. First, the man transferred 20 million and then offered another 40. The other man smiled and said that now this guy will start moving. The man who was sitting at the computer replied that their people were also heading in that direction, so they would be able to grab him. Meanwhile, Deesung climbed onto the corpse of one of the monsters and looked extremely menacingly at the other creatures. They began to back away from fright. Suddenly, a monster appeared who killed another monster with a club. The streamer was sitting behind the car and, pointing the camera at Deesung, begged him to turn the young man in his direction. The number of monsters did not decrease, and Deesung realized that if this continued, his strength would completely run out. Suddenly, Jong-ho appeared next to the kid who was conducting the broadcast. He reminded the young man about the evacuation and took him by the neck away from the car. Out of fright, the guy dropped the camera, and Jong-ho continued to lead him away from the scene. When the young man realized that he would lose all his money, he tried to get out of Jong-ho's hands, but it was useless. They ran for cover, but the monster blocked their way. Seeing the monster so close, the kid from the restaurant fainted and foam began to flow from his mouth. At the moment when the creature was about to kill two men, Deesung flew up to them and killed the monster. The friends get to the nearest shelter and Deesung asks Jong-ho why he came back. The friend does not understand why the young man asked this question, so he replied that he was worried. Then Deesung asks if Jong-ho can stay alive. The young man explained that he needed to go to one place for 20 minutes. Jong-ho replied that Deesung should not worry, because the clans should come soon. A notification from the system appears in front of Deesung, which said that the implementation update was 100% thanks to the murders in this world. Just below it was written that the young man could use the items of the pantheon in this world. The system asked if the guy was ready to enter the pantheon. When the young man agreed, a portal appeared in front of him. Jong-ho saw it and his eyes widened in shock. He doesn't understand who Deesung is since he can open portals. Deesung enters the portal and finds himself in the pantheon. After entering there, he complains of pain in his body, although he has killed only a couple of monsters. Then the young man asks the system to show how much magic power he has left. A notification appears in front of the guy, which says that he has only 10% of his magical powers left. The young man scratches the back of his head and realizes that it wasn't about the weapon at all. He asks what is the fastest way to raise the level of magical powers. A message appears telling the young man to systematize his diary. Next, Deesung will know the time and place of the task, and after completing it, he will receive a reward. After hearing about the diary, the young man remembers the notebook in which he made notes while he was in hell, so as not to go completely crazy. A notification appears in which the system asks if Deesung wants to systematize the diary, and the young man confirms this action. A loading window appears on the table and his red diary appears in front of the guy. The system starts printing, and at this second, moments from his stay in hell pop up in Deesung's head. When the seal is completed, Deesung grabs his head because of the pain and asks to immediately go to the moment when he received magical powers, namely to page 16 in the forest with a predator. The system notifies about returning to page 16, being in hell for 5 years and 75 days. While Deesung returns to the past, Jong-ho and the kid from the restaurant climb the stairs. The streamer decides to ask the man about where the tough guy who defeated the monsters has gone. Jong-ho quickly opened it and asked why he needed this information. The man realized that the young man was offered money for revealing Disong's face. Suddenly they hear a noise upstairs and Young-ho asks the kid to climb in silence, because there may still be surviving monsters upstairs. A man receives a message on his phone from the leader of the Seoul clan, Hwang Jujun. The message says that those responsible for the evacuation from the clan are late, referring to the fact that today is the weekend. After reading the message and putting the phone in his pocket, Young-ho mentally asks Disong to come back as soon as possible. Disong finds himself in the middle of a soulless desert. The system reports that the Predator's forest recorded on page 16 has been revived. It was signed from below that three-dimensional seals interfere with reproducing the picture. When the young man noticed that the place he was in was too quiet, a notification with a new task appeared in front of him. It is necessary to destroy the celestial being that has captured the Predator's forest. The system has allocated 1 hour to complete this task. As a reward, Disong will receive a strengthening of magical powers. There will also be an additional reward. 2,000 points will be added to the total score. Disong hears a noise around him and a creature appears in the sky. The monster releases the laser from his eyes, but the young man manages to dodge the attack. The monster descends to the ground and starts attacking the guy from there. There was a fairly small distance between them and Disong decides to finish with this creature as soon as possible. The young man raises his hand and hits the opponent in the head. A crack appears on it and the monster falls to the ground. In the next second, the creature releases its claws from its hands. He buries them in the ground and rises with them. Calling his enemy annoying, the guy runs at him. The creature manages to get up from the ground, but Disong strikes, because of which the monster's body shatters into small pieces. The guy asks to continue and turning around, he notices a red ball. After that, fear can be seen in his eyes. Young-ho and the kid from the restaurant get to the roof of the building and, opening the door, see several corpses. The guy notices one man who is sitting on the ground and holding his stomach. They run up to the survivor and ask about his condition. The man starts making unintelligible noises, and when Young-ho gets closer he hears the man telling them to run. Young-ho's body shivers and, turning around, he notices the monster. The monster's eyes are burning red, and an evil grin is visible on his face. The kid tells Young-ho to grab the injured man and they will run to the exit. But the man replies that it's too late. Young-ho forbids the young man to move until he says. The kid doesn't understand what's going on. The man tells the fellow and on his command to run to the door. The young man turns his head in fright towards the door and waits for the command. When the monster starts growling and heading towards the people, Young-ho gives the command to the young man. Meanwhile, in the Predator's forest, the red ball increases several times and Disong does not understand what is happening. The item informs about the beginning of rebirth and the body of the slain monster begins to recover. Disong rushes to the side of the ball with all his legs and strikes at it. After that, the percentage of rebirth drops from 10% to 3%. The young man hits his feet on the ball and performing a backflip, lands on the object. The percentage of rebirth is growing rapidly, and Disong continues to strike. At some point, silhouettes of the same monsters can be seen from behind the clouds. The creatures attack the guy with lasers from the eyes and he has to jump to the ground. 2% remains until the end of the rebirth, and Disong realizes that in this way he cannot defeat the enemy, so he decides to find the answer in his memory. The young man leans his hand against his head and starts sorting through his memories. His thoughts are in a complete mess, so it is difficult for him to find the right solution. The guy still manages to find the right memory in his brain. Young-ho tells the kid to run to the door, and they rush as fast as they can to the exit. While the monster flies over them, the guys manage to reach the door and hide from the creature. The monster comes to the door and thrusts his hand into the doorway, trying to grope people. When the hand disappears, Young-ho suggests that the young man go down. Meanwhile, chaos reigns in the pantheon. 3 monsters attack Disong, releasing their claws from their hands. The young man successfully flies past them and thinks that there is very little left. The guy gets to the trees and, pushing off from the tree, lands on the territory of the Predator's forest. Monsters begin to determine the radius of the object's location and are going to attack, but it's too late. A huge creature appears from the ground, which quickly eats the celestial being. Disong makes sure that the swamp whale still has the same appetite and will digest anything. A notification about the completion of the task appears again in front of the young man. Next, the reboot of Han Disong's physical abilities begins. His body begins to light up, and the young man is convinced that there is really more power. The guy gets a bonus for completing the mission, the judge's dagger. Then a sign with information about the item appears. It is a holy object with which the heavenly judges punish their enemies. Also, it is a holy object made by peeling the epidermis from a golem. The stronger the owner, the stronger the weapon becomes. This dagger can be controlled remotely, so the young man launches the weapon into the sky. After flying a short distance, the dagger returns to the owner's hands. Disong decides to return to Earth and a portal opens in front of him. The news anchor talks about the latest events. Recently, there was another opening of portals near Nangokden, and the area was subjected to chaos. A man cannot hide his emotions, because it seems that the situation that happened in Daegu is repeating itself. The presenter asks the professor what his observations on this incident are. The man replies that, firstly, the problem is that this area is managed by the Association of Hunters. He does not understand how people can trust people who are sluggish with the problem, so they also allow themselves days off. Portals are opened periodically, which means that you need to be alert on any weekend or holidays. In this case, the association should be held accountable, the presenter adds. Two men from the Hunters Association are driving in the car. They watch the news and one of them is extremely outraged by what is being broadcast on the news. The man says that hunters from the association cannot receive as much as members of the clan. He is angry at the current situation because they cannot catch him even with the help of special equipment. A man in a suit is sitting in the next seat and asks the other to shut up. In any case, he does not know about them, but he, as a leader, will definitely be fired if they fail. From the guy's phone comes an urgent announcement that a dubious guard with injuries has now appeared in Nangokden. Young-ho and the streamer are hiding from the monster in a nearby restaurant. The kid asks the older one if there is no way to get out of here. It's creepy for him to be here when he remembers the man who died on the roof. Young-ho replies that he is also scared, but they have no other way out, they can only wait for rescuers. There is a crash outside, and the young man looks out from behind the table to find out what these sounds are. The guys mistook this noise for rescuers, but the next second an unknown person breaks through the wall, and Jeong-ho thinks they are monsters. The headless body of the monster falls into the restaurant, and with it Daesun. Seeing a friend, Young-ho rejoices at his appearance. The young man smiles and asks if he is late. Young-ho asks Daesun how he got here. The young man folds his arms on his chest and a grimace of pain appears on his face. A friend asks if Daesun got hurt. The guy ignores his words and turns to the streamer. He asks the kid to turn on the fire to fry some meat. They are both surprised by this request, because now is not the right time and place to eat. In this restaurant lies the headless corpse of a monster. Daesun replies that there is nothing wrong with that. The young man roasts his meat and while he eats, Young-ho and the streamer press their hands to their mouths in disgust. A man in a camouflage uniform enters the restaurant and says that there is a survivor here. The military sees a dead monster and 3 people. The boy begins to rejoice that they are alive and rushes to thank the man. The rescuer pays attention to the guy who ate meat. He doesn't understand how the young man manages to eat in such a situation. Jeong-ho wishes health by putting his palm to his forehead and thanks the man for the work done in such a deep night. He was worried that he couldn't find shelter in time. Noticing a strange expression on the military man's face, Young-ho approaches Daesun and explains that this guy is very shocked, so he behaves strangely. The military apologizes and says that they can't just leave. Realizing what the man is talking about, Young-ho takes out a business card that says that he is from the Seoul clan and is the head of Team 1. Seeing the business card, the man's face relaxes and he replies that he will see them off and asks them to follow him. A hunter from the association and a supervisor arrive at the scene. Corpses are scattered everywhere on the street, and the military is studying the situation. While the manager is inspecting the street, the hunter, leaning against the car, cleansed his stomach. It was unpleasant for him to see this picture. The leader shouts that now is not the right time for this activity, and sends a hunter to check the survivors. The guy apologizes and goes to one of the military. It is provided by a hunter from the association and offers to go inside together. The friends are driving in the car and Young-ho, who was driving, offers Daesun to spend the night with him today. Daesun refuses, saying that they are worried about him at home. Young-ho replies that it would be good if everything turned out to be excitement. Now everyone wants to catch Daesun. Young-ho says he will call his friend's mom himself, and while they are going to his place, they will take a shower and eat fried chicken there. Daesun walks into a friend's house and enthusiastically inspects the apartment. Young-ho sends a friend to wash, and he orders chicken. Daesun comes out of the shower and sees various food on the table. He is surprised by this gesture, and Young-ho says that his friend was never able to eat properly last time. Daesun reminds a friend of his words that if you become a hunter, you can earn money. Young-ho replies that now is the time when such people are appreciated. He He also asks if Disong is going to work as a hunter. The young man responds positively. Young-ho supports his friend's decision and says that if Disong goes to the association and shows his abilities, he will definitely get a B level. And if he tries, maybe he will be able to get an A level. Young-ho guarantees it. Disong decides to ask what levels the friend is talking about. Young-ho explains that it's like ranks. If he is at level B, he will be able to join a large clan, or become a member of the association. In any case, the salary will be serious and at a level many times more. Then Disong asks if there are levels higher. Young-ho replies that there is. There is a level S and there are only 5 such people out of 2 million awakened. Young-ho chuckles and asks a friend if he is going to become the 6th. The guy says that you don't need to have such ambitions. It would be good if Dasan was taken at least, and it's not so easy to get into level A in Korea. Young-ho asks his friend again to make sure of his words whether Disong is really going to become a hunter. The young man nods his head. Then Young-ho asks to leave this matter to him, and they hit cans of beer, wishing each other great success. 2 men are sitting in a restaurant and one of them is having dinner while the other is trembling with fear. Next to the long-haired man is a photo of Disong, and he points at it with a knife. He says that this crazy debtor destroyed their entire organization. The man sitting opposite agrees with his words. Lee Sagu is the leader of the Red Square clan. He wipes the corners of his lips with a white napkin and says that they are in a difficult situation. Lee Sagu gets up from his chair and continues, saying that if they were alive, they could have escaped. The man does not understand why they came to him and told him about it. Lee Sagu walks up to the man and puts her hands on his shoulders. The bandit begins to tremble even more with fear, and he says that they had nowhere else to turn. Lee Sagu replies that there was nothing else for him to do, because the bandit can't report to the police. However, Lee Sug doesn't understand why his interlocutor is trembling so much. Then he understands what's going on and asks if he's acting like this because of that bandit. Lee Sagu nods his head towards the dead bandit, under which there was a large pool of blood. Tears begin to accumulate in the man's eyes, and he begs Lee Soga to spare his life. The young man replies that he should not worry, because they are going to take only money. No matter how they were robbed, they probably still have hidden savings. The bandit replies that he held the lowest position, so he doesn't know anything about it. The man cries and asks to believe him. Lee Sagu puts his hand on the bandit's head and decides to believe him. The bandit does not believe his ears and thanks the head for it. In the next second, Sagu says that they will finish on this and the bandit's head shatters into pieces. Sagu walks away from the table and picks up a photo of Disong, orders him to deal with it. Disong approaches the building of the Hunters Association of Korea. Jeong-ho, who gave him a ride, says that first Disong will need to go inside and tell the employee at the entrance that he has come to receive a certificate of his awakening. Then they'll tell him everything. Disong nods to his friend and starts to leave. Jeong-ho shouts after him so that he does not forget to use polite speech. At the end, the friend adds that he will go to work while Disong is busy and asks him to write to him when the results come. The young man comes closer to the building and notices a large number of people at the entrance, who also came here to get a certificate. Dasan was sitting in the corridor outside the examination room. Sitting in line and looking down at the ticket, the young man realized that hunters are quite a sought-after position. He hopes that they will reach number 9 quickly. A message from his mother comes to the young man's phone. She asked him if he was still at Chang-ho's. The woman warned her son that her back ached and she took a day off at work. Disong decided that it was better for his mom not to know what he was going to do. Therefore, he answers that he is still at Young-ho. He wanted to take a shower slowly and go home. In response, a message comes asking if Disong has eaten. If not, then let him come home. Jisoo wanted to have lunch together and went to get soup, Mom writes. The young man smiles, looking at the phone screen and wants to return home as soon as possible. A girl comes out of the ward and informs that the 9th number is next in line, so you need to be ready. The young man looks down at the piece of paper with the number and hears the screams of his grandfather. The man was arguing with the employee, convincing him that he was awake, because he definitely felt that this had happened to him. The employee tries to explain to the man that if the drug does not recognize this, then the person is not awake. But the grandfather does not hear the young man. He shifts the blame to the drug, saying that it is defective. People in the queue are getting angry, because it has become too noisy in the corridor because of Grandpa's screams. The man points his finger at his head and says that he is definitely awake, because almost all his hair fell out during the night. After hearing this, the visitors start laughing, and Dasan is angry about this situation, because he has a delicious soup waiting for him at home. When Grandpa starts threatening the employee that he will go to the boss and report everything, Dasan approaches him from behind. The young man puts his hand on the man's head and reminds him that people in the corridor are waiting for their turn. The grandfather faded away and lowering the tone of his voice says that they have worthless equipment because he is definitely awakened. When a young man asks an employee if the device is really broken, a man approaches them and says that he can check its performance because he is awakened. He goes to the machine and puts his hand to the ball, which lights up green, which indicates that the man has a sea level. After that, the girl asks the man to get out because there is a queue in the corridor, and the grandfather does not calm down and says that the device may be wrong. The employee apologizes to Disong for the incident and invites him in. When the young man walks away from the staff, the girl whispers to her son-in-law that this guy is likely to have a high level. The man grins and snapping his fingers on the girl's forehead tells her to work, not to make eyes. The worker recalls that at the moment when Disong approached his grandfather, the young man caused her a feeling of fear. Therefore, she concludes that if the young man is awakened, then he will definitely be above level B. A phone call rings in the office of the branch manager. The man picks up the phone and asks what happened. The voice on the phone asks the head to go down to the 6th floor in the 3rd ward. The man does not understand why he needs to go down there, and the voice replies that it is better for him to see it for himself. A man rides in an elevator and thinks that someone with an S level has appeared. But the head quickly discards these thoughts from his head, deciding that, as usual, one of the subjects is brawling. People gathered near the 3rd ward, who were watching what was happening. The head pushes people aside and goes into the ward. Entering the office, the man sees that glass balls are broken on the apparatus for checking the level of awakened ones. A guy approaches the manager and explains that when Dasan approached the device started flashing different colors. This happened for the first time. A little earlier, when Disong put his hand to the device, the ball lit up with various colors. Seeing this, the young man asked the employee if this should be the case. The man replied that this sometimes happens, and at that moment the glass balls cracked and smoke filled the ward. The manager asks his employees if there was a malfunction of the devices. The employee replied that they had checked 3 devices, and they all reacted in a similar way. The manager replied that all these devices could not be broken. Hearing the conversation of the men, Dasan hoped inside that they would not demand monetary compensation from the young man. The guy decides to ask what he should do now and whether he needs to wait for the results to appear. The manager thought that if they continue to test it in this way, then they will only break the rest of the devices. The man clears his throat and tells Han Disong that this is the first time they have encountered such a situation, so the decision should be made by the border guards. Disong doesn't understand who the man is talking about. He explains that in a situation where the apparatus cannot be determined, the judges conduct a licensing test, and based on its results, they identify the level. The young man asks if this test will be fair. He is told that the assessment will take place according to the established criteria, so the young man cannot worry about this. The young man accepts this outcome of events and, after saying goodbye to the employees of the association, leaves. The head wipes the beads of sweat from his forehead with the words that they cannot live in peace. The worker approaches the man and asks him about the fact that the crystal ball reacts to foreign energy in the body of the awakened. The supervisor confirms her words, and the girl assumes that Han Disong's energy has exceeded the scale that the ball can withstand. After all, it is possible that the balloon exploded for this reason. Upon hearing this, one of the employees laughs into his fist and, catching the girl's gaze on him, apologizes. The manager believes that the girl's assumption is nonsense, because judging by her words, Han Disong is above the S level. The employee replies that there is such a possibility. The man answers her so that she thinks before she speaks. There's a lot of fiction going on in the world right now, but Disong can't be a god if you rely on the girl's words. The young man returns home and decides to call his friend Young-ho. He asks about the results of the inspection, and Disong replies that he was sent to the border guards. After hearing about the border guards, Jong-ho assumes that the device failed, but the young man denies his words. Then Young-ho asks what happened. Disong replies to a friend that the device is broken. After hearing about this, Young-ho hoped that his friend had not made a scandal there, but Disong again answers in the negative. A classmate decides to clarify the order of Han Disong's actions. He asks that after the young man put his hand on the device, as he was told, it broke down. Disong finally gives a positive answer. Young-ho replies that his friend is full of surprises. He is also confident that Disong will pass the test and get a high level. Sensing something strange, the young man stops and replies that he doesn't care. The friend finally says that later he will send the date of the test and all the information about it to Disong. After saying goodbye to a friend and completing the call, the young man turns back and sees a house that was under construction. Disong looks closely and sees a man on the top floor who is aiming a firearm at him. The girl thinks that no matter how you look, the young man does not look so strong. But she doesn't care how strong he is, one shot will solve everything. When the girl points the sight at Disong, the young man slowly turned his head in her direction and pointing his fingers at the head said that she should shoot at this place. The killer did not expect that she was discovered, because this has never happened to her. The killer straightens up and wonders how the guy can hear her voice from such a distance. When the girl decides to hide, Disong tells her to shoot again. Hearing this, the girl sits down again and shoots the young man. The girl hits the target and smoke appears around the guy. When it dissipates, she sees that the young man was completely unharmed. He continued to stand still. The blonde does not believe in what is happening, because it was not a simple cartridge, but an aura bullet. The girl looks at the guy to understand who he is. After a second, she tells herself to pack up and get out of here first. The killer leaves the weapon and runs away as fast as he can. But she does not have time to do this. Her leg is wounded by Disong's dagger and she falls to the floor. The next moment she sees her victim in front of her. A smile appears on his face and the young man regrets that the girl did not aim well, but even so she will not be able to kill him. The girl pulls out a gun from behind her back and points it at Disong. The blonde asks why he stayed alive after the aura weapon and where he came from. The guy replies that he is Han Disong, returned from hell. The killer loses his temper and says that everything said is nonsense. This guy was a real monster in her eyes. The girl starts shooting at the young man, but he is unshakable. When the cartridges in the pistol run out and a cloud of smoke forms in the place where she shot, the girl asks aloud to herself whether Disong has died. Suddenly, a young man's voice is heard behind her. The girl is confused because she saw him fall. The guy grabs the blonde by the neck and presses her against the wall. She tries to get out of the trap, but black silhouettes with red eyes appear behind her, laughing ominously. When the girl loses consciousness, the young man looks at her and thinks that he did not even emit his poison. And the blonde is already unconscious. Disong collects bullets from the floor and pays attention to the guitar case. The young man approaches him and sees his photo there, as well as pictures of his sister and mother. The killer wakes up and starts screaming. She is pressed against the wall by dark blurry hands that do not allow the girl to escape. The young man approaches her and tells her to answer his questions. If he says too much or talks nonsense, then Disong will kill him. The young man asks the girl about who sent her. After hearing this, the killer realizes that not a single word about the Red Horse clan can slip through. Then she remembers one person who is listed as missing. If the girl gives him a tip, then Disong will not suspect anything. The girl calls her name Kim Sohun. Hearing this name, the young man asks who it is. The blonde replies that this is the bully whom Disong recently robbed and even took money from the safe. The young man remembers about 500 million, and the girl rejoices and decides that first she needs to get out of here. The blonde confirms his words about the named amount and says that if Disong lets her go, she will tell about where this person is. In the next second, the young man releases an attack from his hands, which punches a hole in the girl's shoulder. A girl screams, and she asks why she got hit, because she told everything. Disong replied that she was too kind for a mercenary. The young man repeats that if the blonde starts talking nonsense again, he will kill her. The girl realizes that she was too hasty and now does not know what to do. The guy again asks his question, who sent her? The girl realizes that she has already failed the task. Even if she managed to get out of here alive, the man from the Red Horse clan would kill her. Wherever she goes, the result will be the same. The blonde puts her hand to her chest. The area around her lights up with a purple light. She says that no matter how much the young man asks her, the answer will still be the same. This behavior infuriates Disong, so putting two fingers in front of him in the form of a pistol, the guy kills the killer. Disong is angry that he has not found out who sent the girl, and, on top of everything else, he will have to clean up the corpse. The young man puts his hand to his head and starts reading the diary. Having named the keyword, the memory of the deceased, the guy begins to search for information. Having found the right page, the young man opens a portal to the pantheon. He understands that there are already enough portals open, but it will be better if he finds out something. Once in the pantheon, the system welcomes Han Disong. Then the following notification appears with a question about what date and place the young man would like to visit. Disong names page 134, which is written about the imprisonment of the soul. Soul imprisonment is the main royal weapon, along with the Demon King, one of the 15 main forces of hell. This is an artifact that connects with the deceased through blood. Initially, Disong thought that with the help of soul imprisonment, he would be able to fight comfortably. But the one with whom he associated himself turned out to be too weak. A message appears in front of the young man, in which a page, years and days were written. namely 134 pages of 67 years and 198 days. A little below was written the question of whether the young man wants to return to the pantheon. Disong understands that the situation is different on Earth, so this time he uses it properly. The young man confirms the action and takes him to page 34 in a place called Ghost River. Once on the spot, the young man examines the area and realizes that on the other side of this river is the territory of the king. There used to be a boat there and a young man could cross the river, but now there was no boat, not even trees, and it was impossible to swim across. Putting a body in a river would mean destroying it with the dead. Suddenly, a notification appears from the system, on which information about a new task is written. It is necessary to destroy the celestial beings that capture the river in 30 minutes. The enemies discover an unidentified intruder in the form of Disong and are going to attack. While the creatures are waiting for approval for destruction, the young man raises his eyes to the sky and monsters with purple eyes. Then a notification appears on which the origin of the White Lord was told. This is a mechanical structure that operates independently. The monsters get permission to destroy and start attacking. In the hope that the young man will be given a boat for winning this task, he runs to the opponents, pulling out his dagger. Disong quickly runs past the attacks of mechanical creatures. The strongest of all the monsters present releases small purple bombs from its trunk, but Disong manages to react and runs away from the blows in time. Then the guy runs up to the largest creature and inserting a dagger into the belly runs along the monster, thereby killing the monster. The monster falls to the ground, and attacks in the form of purple bombs begin to fly from the sky to the young man. The guy lands on the ground to prepare for further combat. Morning, home, and someone tried to wake up. Someone who had a clear voice caressing the ear. He did not subside and asked to wake up, because it was already morning. The rays illuminated the room and the sleeping man who was hiding under the blanket, and could not understand whether he was still asleep or not. The voice asked me to wake up, because Mom always said that. The one who does not get up on time is a bad child, and the father is a terrible dormouse. This phrase made the hero immediately open his eyes. Jumping up, he asked who called him dad. In front of him sat a charming girl with blonde hair and smiling asked her father to wake up. The sun had already risen on the street. The girl informed her sleepy father. The young man remembered that yesterday he suddenly had a daughter and it was not a dream. Looking at the child, our hero thought, tired and not getting enough sleep with bruises under his eyes. The daughter he had to take care of now. The girl looked at the surprised father and happily asked to go to breakfast with her. It was a little unexpected for the young man. He was already far from 20, and the young man was an ordinary graduate student. With black eyes and a cup of coffee, he cursed the professor. The hero thought that he always turned a blind eye to the professor's antics, but this time he crossed the line. Our hero dreamed only of a good job and a good salary. Sitting at the young man's desk, they called and there was a mother on the phone who asked her son if he had eaten, to which the young man was dissatisfied with her question and said that such an adult as he could provide for himself, and answering that he was eating well, the topic with food was over. A minute later, the mother started a conversation that was completed for the young man last time. He explained that he needed to get a degree to become a good specialist, because if he left now, then who would hire him? Huge companies did not hire just anyone. The young man got angry and spoke very loudly and thereby attracted the attention of other cafe visitors. Informing his mother that the young man was in a bad mood because of the professor, he packed his things and walked away. And his mother apparently wanted to finish him off with her conversations. Having put down a tray with coffee, our hero left the establishment. He was overcome by thoughts that his mother thought that the young man was not taken simply because he allegedly did not want it. He did not work in graduate school out of a great desire. Due to the high prices for education, our hero spent almost all of his parents' savings. But even they were not enough, the hero constantly took academic leave in one semester, then in another. He worked part-time as a waiter and delivered food to pay for his studies and finally, 6 years later, received a bachelor's degree. However, the professor explained that in order to work in a scientific and technical specialty, the young man also needed a master's degree. The professor did not insist on anything. But it would have been better, so we had to extend the training. As soon as our hero managed to finish his master's degree, he was told that he would be able to teach only after receiving a doctorate. Now the young man wanted to earn money as soon as possible in order to reduce his worries a little. If he can get a doctorate, as soon as he thought about it, he realized that while talking he got angry and yelled at his mother. The young man looked sadly at his phone and decided to call her back. The hero decided to apologize for his words, because who didn't want to live happily and earn well or have a strong family? Thanking his mom for worrying about him, he hung up. That's just in the position of a young man. When even the body was already bad, the young man considered it all an impossible dream that he could not fulfill. Let's talk with mom. And looking at the phone, our hero did not stop being surprised by his own antics. Then he dialed the number and offered to drink soju. Because it was Friday, perhaps the interlocutor was not busy, as he could keep our hero company. Waking up in the morning, the sun was shining in the young man's face, and he, wrinkling his face, thought that yesterday he had a little too much alcohol. His head was splitting so much that the young man thought he would die right on his bed. While our hero was lying and thinking about his condition, someone was persistently knocking on the door. The young man thought that it was a peddler, and after knocking a couple of times he would leave. But 5 minutes later the level of anger of our hero rose, and he himself got out of bed, thinking about the immortal peddler. Getting out of bed and holding on to his aching head, the young man was impressed by the persistence of ringing 5 minutes in a row. Opening the door with anger, the young man shouted that he would not buy anything, because he did not trust those sellers who went home and offered something. In front of him stood a cute girl with a bag in her hands and looked at the guy in fright. As soon as he saw the girl, all the anger immediately went away, and the guy smiled and asked if she was messing with the doorbell. The weakness of the young man was everything cute. The guy asked what happened to her and whether the girl was too lightly dressed for such weather. The little girl stood and looked at the young man silently. There were suitcases next to her. The young man, scratching his head and wondering what to do with the situation, thought that the girl might have been lost and he had to report it to the police. But then the little girl began to ask her father in a questioning voice, looking directly at our hero. Looking at the girl and hearing the word, "Dad," one question arose in the hero's head. The young man decided that the girl had lost her dad and decided to ask her about it, because maybe her uncle was like her father. But the girl replied that dad was dad, looking directly at our hero. But the young man began to tell the baby that he was not her dad. It seems that the girl did not know this yet because she was little. But to have a child, you had to be married, and the uncle was not married? The young man told the girl. The girl, continuing to look at our hero, replied that it was not so. And then the young man, holding his head, which was already boiling, decided to ask the main question. Who was the girl's mother then? The girl knew the answer to this question and said that her mother's name was Pyong. And then the young man understood, but it absolutely could not be, he thought to himself. He remembered the girl, the same Pyong, who lived in the first complex of Jugon. The hero began to remember what happened 7 years ago, and then he and his wife were on a hike and then slept together. But after that the girl suddenly disappeared. Now the girl in front of him was saying that she was his child. They were standing in the hallway, and the young man was holding his head remembering everything, and the girl was trying to pick up the phone. The little girl said that her mom told her to call when she got to dad and picked up the phone from the floor, which our hero had dropped earlier. Dialed mom's number, saying that she got there and nothing happened to her because she was her daughter. At this moment, the young man, leaning his head against the wall, tried to believe in the situation. After talking to her mother, she asked to give her father to the phone. And the girl handed the phone to her father, saying that it was her mother. The young man was shaking all over. Picking up the phone, he nervously answered the phone. On the other end, a female voice was telling Jahoon that she hadn't heard him for a long time and was asking how he was doing. Shaking with understanding, the young man heard PN and asked if it was true that it was her. The girl answered positively, because who else besides her could it be? Then Jahoon decided to ask what was going on here and where the child was from. 6. He thought that the girl was joking with him. The girl watched the young man in surprise sitting on a suitcase behind him. A female voice on the phone answered that it was not a joke and Charon understood everything, and therefore the guy had to be careful with words, and yes, it was their common child. The young man could not believe it, and the girl said that he could deny it as much as he wanted. But nothing would change, and if he did not believe the girl at all, he could go to the clinic and do a paternity test. The young man tried to find out then why Ina disappeared, what she had the circumstances, the girl answered. And what circumstances were these? The young man tried to find out. The girl reported that she could not tell anything about it, but it was because of them that she had to leave Charon to her father. The girl had to live with her father for a while, and Ina was going to send money for the girl. The girl informed our hero by phone, saying that she had already taken care of all legal issues. The girl said that she could not talk for a long time and offered to call next time. The young man did not understand anything and asked the girl to wait. Unable to stand it, he wanted to swear, but then the girl began to repeat after him, and for the place of what the young man wanted to say, it turned out to be a real blessing the weather today. If our hero could, he would like to swear like that now, but there was no such opportunity. The girl, smiling, repeated after the Pope about the real grace. Since there was a child here, the young man had to refrain from swearing. Addressing the girl, Jihoon asked if her name was Charon and offered to go inside. Taking her suitcase, the young man went first, and the happy girl, agreeing with her father's words, ran after him, taking the young man by the hand. The girl was glad that she was at her dad's house for the first time and thought it would be fun. Our hero was thinking completely the opposite, because a daughter suddenly appeared and everything suddenly became more complicated. The girl just looked at dad and smiled. The hero did not suspect at that moment how this meeting would turn his ordinary life around, and taking the girl by the hand, he led her home. And so the life of our hero with Charon began. Looking at the shelves in the house, the girl saw that everything was empty. Our hero, seeing that there was nothing on the shelves either, recalled his bachelor life. On weekdays he ate outside the house, on weekends he slept. In the evening the hero ordered himself something for dinner, so our hero did not know what to feed the child who appeared in the house at the moment. Jihoon, grabbing his jacket, decided that it was necessary to go grocery shopping. Then the girl, rejoicing, said that since the young man was going to the store, she also wanted to. Getting dressed, the hero then offered to go to the store together. Here, looking at the child, our hero thought about the fact that it was January and a freezing wind, and all that the girl was wearing was a dress. The young man decided to ask if it was all the clothes that the girl had and whether she would freeze on the street in this form. Then the girl smiled and said that Charon would not freeze, although she said so. But the young man was still worried about her, and lifting the girl in his arms, he offered to go to her like that, wrapping her in his jacket. The girl was very warm, and the young man did not understand why she then came to him undressed. The girl, smiling, snuggled up to her dad and reported that she didn't care about the cold, but it was very nice in his jacket and everything suited her. Snuggling up to the girl, the young man felt warmth and love, but he still offered her to buy clothes. Our hero could not always wear it in a jacket. On the street, everyone was just talking about Jihoon and Charon, who was sitting in her father's arms. At that moment our hero firmly decided to buy Charon a down jacket. Around people were touched by the girl and her beauty, but some wondered why the child was so lightly dressed in the middle of winter. Then the young man, holding the child, rushed to the children's clothing store that was across the street and decided to buy something warmer so as not to attract attention. Going into the store, the young man was thanked and asked to come again. Our hero could not understand why clothes for children could be more expensive than clothes for adults. The young man felt his card being emptied, looking at the check that was given to him in the store. The girl was very pleased that dad bought everything so much. When they left the store, the young man had such a distressed face, and the girl asked if her father was in pain because of such a strange facial expression. Jihoon wanted to explain to the girl that she just misunderstood him. The young man, taking the cart, said that he no longer remembered the last time he cooked. Our hero did not even remember whether his rice cooking machine was still working. Looking at the cereal stand, the young man thought that he had almost no money left and maybe it was a good idea to take the cereal. Then Jihoon decided to ask if Charon liked cereal, showing the girl a box of cereal. The girl, looking at them, said that she would like everything that dad would cook. Jihoon breathed a sigh of relief that the girl would at least eat cereal, and put them in the cart. Then he realized that he felt sick. The sensations that he was experiencing were familiar. The young man felt pain and realized that he had eaten something wrong last night. After asking his daughter to stay in the store, our hero ran to the restroom. The girl proudly informed her father that she would look around the store for now. After running away and leaving their daughter alone in the store, everyone immediately paid attention to the beautiful and sweet Charon, who changed her face in a second and confidently walked in the other direction. Everyone, looking at the girl, thought about how beautiful she was and that most likely she was a model with such an appearance. Just as everyone was surprised by the moment that the child was walking alone in the store without parents. An adult man approached the girl and decided to ask where her parents were and if she was lost, to which the girl replied that her parent was in the bathroom. Then sitting down to the girl, the man stroked her on the head and asked if the girl needed help. But turning around and expressing anger, the girl showed with all her appearance and words that it was none of his business. The man was scared. Everyone was looking at the girl, who instantly turned from a cutie into an angry and cold doll. Everyone was looking in her direction and whispering that they saw black lightning behind the girl. She sparkled behind the back of the sweet and beautiful Charon. Then the father returned, scratching his head, apologized to his daughter, because there were so many people, and he could not find her. Everyone was looking at them. Smiling, Charon said that she was a good girl and waited for dad. She also wanted to make sure that her father no longer had a stomach ache and he was in perfect order. Touching the young man's stomach, she said that Charon's hand was the doctor's hand and a green light appeared near her hands. With a sweet expression on her face, the girl asked Dad's stomach to get better so that he felt good. The young man, looking at his daughter, who was running her hands over his stomach, smiling at his father, thought that it did not seem to him that his condition was improving and his stomach was not hurting so much. People passing by whispered that the young man was not like the girl's father, because they were not at all alike. Then someone asked the speaker to be quieter. Perhaps the girl went to her mother. Our hero looked in their direction. The girls, pretending not to notice the look of the young man, said that the girl's mother was very beautiful, and the young man apparently had a lot of money since he was with such a beauty. But another girl whispered to her friend that the young man did not look like a rich man and looked rather poor. Jihoon was annoyed that he was being discussed by those with whom he was not even familiar, but they were right. The girl was not like her father. At the same time, our hero looked at the child that was smiling at him. After shopping and listening to gossip, our hero decided that it was time to go home. Standing at the cash register and paying off the girl who worked as a cashier, our hero was visited by various thoughts. For example, that the girl could not be his child at all, because as he had noticed earlier, they were not at all alike. In the evening, when he came home, the young man sat down at the computer and began to study various information. The fee for the test at a private research institution was very expensive, but it was the only way not to attract too much attention. Our hero decided, looking at the page on his computer. It seems that the hair is all that Jihoon needed to give them for an examination to establish paternity. The young man thought that he could take a few strands while combing the girl. Deciding to do it tomorrow, he remembered that he had to warn the professor that he would be delayed due to personal circumstances, for which he would receive from him again. Then our hero's gaze fell on the sleeping Charon. The young man, looking at the girl, thought about Anu's words that this baby was their child. However, there was not a single feature in her that resembled the features of a young man. There was only one thought in the hero's head, that it was not his daughter. He looked sadly at the sleeping child, and our hero decided that he should know for sure as soon as he does a DNA test tomorrow. The next day, early in the morning, our hero went to a private clinic. Dumbfounded, he looked at the doctor smiling at the young man, who informed him that according to the results of the paternity test, both Kim Jihoon and Kim Charon were indeed related by blood. The girl was really the daughter of a young man who was shocked by this factor and stared in surprise at the doctor who showed him the results. The young man began to say that he and his daughter were not at all alike. Then the doctor explained to the young man that all the allelic genes coincided and therefore there was no reason for suspicion. The young man looked at the test results and heard only unrelated chatter in the background. Charon was indeed his daughter. After leaving the clinic, our hero did not know what to do. Jihoon was worried about whether Jihoon would be able to take care of the baby. Although Ina said she would help with expenses, the young man understood that he had his own life and he could not just change it. He had to go to the laboratory, and if he enrolled the girl in kindergarten, but then how could he pick her up? On the way home, our hero was overcome by all thoughts about his daughter and how his life had changed now, and that he had to think so much about someone. The experiences were only accumulating and there were already a whole bunch of them. With a sigh and a sad face, the young man went into the house, where Charon rushed to him with hugs and a smile, greeting his father. Hugging, the young man asked if everything was all right with Charon. The girl happily told her father that watching TV was fun for her. The newly made father began to teach the girl life and explained to her that if she sat very close to the screen, her eyes would deteriorate and she would have to wear glasses. The girl reported that she had good eyesight and asked her father not to worry about it. Looking at his daughter, the young man thought that his mood was much better when Charon was at home. Stroking the girl on the head, the young man said that he was going to take a shower and the girl could watch some more TV. Standing in the bathroom and brushing his teeth, the young man thought that everything had to get better somehow. Since there were such circumstances, then he could give up his degree and look for a job. In any case, the young man did not like the arrogant professor, so he decided that everything would be fine. Then brushing her teeth, the lock in the door clicked and the daughter reported that she also wanted to brush her teeth. And after asking the Pope for pasta, Charon handed the brush to her father, who obediently put the paste down. The young man looked at his daughter and thought about how cute she was. The girl was brushing her teeth. While Charon was brushing her teeth, her father decided to ask what she had been doing all day, and whether she was bored at home alone. The girl said that she was watching TV, and also told her father that she was bored without him, because the girl wanted to spend time with her dad. But smiling, the little girl asked her dad not to worry, she could wait while her father was at work. Jihoon patted his daughter on the head and decided to praise Charon for being such an adult. Then the girl said that her mother also often told her this, and she was smiling at Dad. The young man then decided to ask where the girl had lived with her mother before, and Charon told the young man that it was far, far away to this place and added that she would like her father to live there too. The young man thought about her words, what the girl meant. Maybe, he thought, Charon was talking about abroad and suggested that he move there or somewhere else. But these are not the times of the Joseon dynasty, so immigration did not make much sense, the young man thought to himself. Our hero had a lot of questions for his daughter, and pouring water into a glass for the girl. He thought that he could not extract all the details from the child. Decided that he would learn everything gradually while he lived with Charon. Night came and it was time to go to bed. The father put his daughter in bed and lay down next to her on the pillow. The girl told her father about how happy she was that she would sleep with Dad. The young man was surprised by such words, and then the girl asked her father if he was glad that his daughter had moved to him. The father replied to the girl that he was glad. She beamed with happiness and offered to give Dad a massage, saying that she was good at it. The father turned over, and the girl began to massage with her small hands, asking if the father liked how the girl tried and whether it was pleasant to him. Our hero immediately relaxed after a long day. After a hot bath and massage, the young man felt that his eyes were closing. The girl, having finished doing the massage, asked her father if he was asleep, but the young man did not answer. He fell into a deep sleep. Looking at her father and smiling, the girl poked her little finger on his cheek. The father was really asleep. The girl wished her father peace of mind. The girl had energy in her hands and saying that her father was healthy and calm. She poured this energy into the sleeping Jihoon and then wished her father sweet dreams and went to bed herself. In the morning, our hero, as always, the alarm clock rang and the young man woke up and realized that it was already morning. Having decided to stretch a little, the young man felt that his neck did not hurt at all, and after pressing everywhere, he made sure that he felt great. Taking out breakfast from the shelf, the hero thought that he hadn't done anything special yesterday. After putting the girl's breakfast, he wanted to call her to the table, but Charon had already got up and came to her father herself with a request to hug her. The young man took the girl in his arms and hugged her. She asked if the father felt refreshed this morning. Then the young man was surprised how the girl could find out about it. Then the baby told her dad that it was all thanks to Charon's massage and proudly hugged her father. Our hero, stroking his daughter on the head, said that his health was wonderful thanks to the girl. They hugged, and the young man confessed to the girl that he felt stronger because of his baby, because he had only her, Charon. The girl, rejoicing at her father's reaction, told him that she would do a massage every day. Jihoon, agreeing with his daughter, asked her to have breakfast, because she was probably hungry, and a happy girl agreed with her father. The phone was vibrating on the table and the young man, looking at it, wanted to find out who was calling him. The inscription Mom appeared on the phone, and then our hero realized that he had not told anyone about what had happened to him. He had completely lost it from his head. The young man had to tell his parents that they had a granddaughter, because it was still very difficult for the guy to lie to his parents in everything. There was a caller on the phone, and the young man could not decide whether he should have picked up the phone or not. Deciding to calm down, the young man wanted to pick up the phone and answer the call as if nothing had happened. Repeating this to himself as naturally as possible, the young man picked up the phone and greeted his mother. The young man's voice sounded strange at the same time, because he was nervous, and his mother noticed it. She wondered if anything had happened because the young man's voice sounded very strange. Then the guy decided to ask his parents and then answer himself, while his daughter was eating and looking at the young man. He also asked his parents if they had had breakfast, and then, in response to his mother's question, he almost blabbed about Charon that she had breakfast with him. The young man said that he was going to eat cereal, and thereby reassured his mother that he ate at least cereal. The young man believed that he ate normally, and informed his mother about it. Mom informed the young man that she was going to call him yesterday. The guy's hand that was scratching the back of his head froze, and the mother reported that she had looked at several places for the young man where he could earn extra money. And then our hero told his mother that he had already made a decision. The young man decided that he would not apply for a doctorate, but would simply try to get a job after this year. The hero's mother was delighted with her son's news and asked if he would come to them for the new year. The young man looked at Charon and informed his mother that he would come for the new year, and before him, too. Then the interested mother asked when her son was going to visit them so that she could cook what he likes. The young man told his mother that he was going to visit them next week. Wishing a good day, Mom said goodbye to the young man, and our hero meanwhile exhaled. Our sad hero decided to introduce Charon to his parents next week. They are probably so happy that the young man reported that he was going to get a normal job. Jihoon was worried about whether he had to tell them other bad news in his opinion. Charon, meanwhile, rushed into her father's arms, thereby surprising the young man. The young man did not understand that the girl had a rush of tenderness and asked about it. The little girl replied that her father looked very unhappy, and therefore she also felt sad. Then our hero reported that he was fine and the girl had nothing to worry about. The girl with tears in her eyes told her father that he could tell Charon everything if something bothered him, and then Charon would save her father from all worries. The young man promised that he would tell Charon everything if something bothered him and invited the girl to return to the table and finish their breakfast. The flakes seemed very tasty for the girl because she ate them together with her father. The young man realized that, looking at the laughing Charon, he felt that all the experiences somehow disappeared in an instant. The girl was smiling and eating her cereal. The young man wanted time to stop and all his worries to go away forever. When he came to study, he was met by a classmate who wondered where the circles under Jihoon's eyes had gone. Maybe the young man secretly went to a dermatologist or something like that. Our hero only nervously scratched his cheek and looked at his friend, answering that he did not know what the secret was. Our hero did not attach much importance to the absence of pain in his neck, which had been hurting him constantly earlier when he woke up. But the bags under his eyes that he had had since he started working in the laboratory also disappeared. The young man looked at himself in the mirror all morning, watching the changes in his face. Standing next to his classmate, our hero wondered if it could be because of his daughter's massage, but from a scientific point of view it was impossible. While our hero was thinking about his own, the young man next to him, also looking at Jihna, told him that not so long ago the professor was looking for him. When asked why the professor was looking for a hero, the friend could not answer, and he also informed our hero that the professor, judging by his facial expression, was in a terrible mood, and therefore a friend warned his Hyung to be careful with the professor. Realizing that the friend's story was not the most impressive, our hero thanked him for the fact that the young man shared information with him and went about his business waving his hand. After knocking on the door, the young man informed the professor that he had heard that he was looking for him. Immediately sheets of paper flew into our hero's face, and the professor, shouting at Jihoon, asked why he brought him the writing, thinking that it was a good essay. The young man picked up the signatures, and the professor pointed out to him that the young man wrote therefore, and apparently wanted to make his debut as a poet, and he should have prescribed the concept in more detail and accurately. The young man was apologizing to the professor. The young man was on his knees and collecting papers while the professor was standing over him and looking at the professor. He was talking about the cute face of our hero, who obviously slept well after writing such a bad essay. The young man was apologizing to the professor again. Then the professor continued to put pressure on the young man, asking him what would happen if he recommended the young man to a familiar company. Even his student did not meet the requirements and thereby disgraced his professor, he informed him. The young man was already almost 30, and the professor did not understand why he was not able to behave like a human being here. Did he no longer need his recommendations anymore? The man of our hero asked. The young man stood, and already from the words of the professor his hands began to twitch. Didn't he know how much easier it would be to find a job in this industry if the professor said just a few words about the young man? Because his recommendations solved the problem of competition and employment. All this time, the young man continued to listen to him, and at some point the chatter no longer sounded in his ears, but was somewhere in the distance. Our hero was furious with the situation, because yesterday he told him that it was a good approach. Every time the professor was in a bad mood, he found fault with every little thing for no reason, and if he has nothing more to say, he tries to put pressure on employment problems. Having finished his tirade, the professor demanded to redo everything immediately. After that, taking the young man by the shoulder, he asked if he had decided about a doctorate. The young man sadly replied that he had not. It would be better to do technical research with a doctorate, the professor said, and asked the young man to think about it and told him that he was free. The young man obeyed the professor and left. After leaving the office, the friend who had previously spoken to our hero asked if Hyun was okay. The young man only turned his head in response. Then a friend, running after the guy, asked him not to get upset because the professor constantly behaved like this. The young man thanked his friend for his words. Sitting down at his chair, Jihoon thought that all this was very stressful for him. He would like to ruin everything if he could, and looking at the phone, he thought that the best way out might have been to make a big scandal and just quit. Then unlocking the phone, he saw a photo with his daughter, which was taken by Shiri and herself. This touched our hero, and he looked at his cute baby. Looking at the photo with the girl, where she was in the foreground. Our hero broke into a smile and felt better. Exhaling, he decided that he had only 6 months left to hold out and then he would quit. Until that moment, he decided that he would pretend to be a vegetable. The young man did not want to do something that he could find fault with later. He decided to live as if he did not exist. Clicking on the keyboard and humming a melody on, the hero smiled. Countless Sunbi had done this before him, and he decided that he was no worse than them and therefore could cope with this task. After sitting at the computer and saddling all the edits that the professor needed, our hero thought that it was done perfectly, even all the corrections. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, the young man knew that now he had to go to take care of Charon. Addressing Yerem, the guy asked if she accidentally knew where the professor was now. The girl, turning around, said that she did not know, and how could she know where the professor could be. The young man apologized for disturbing the girl, and she quickly left the office. Then the hero, looking after her, decided that the girl had a lot of stress, since she was responding so aggressively. It seemed to the young man that lately the girl was getting more and more nervous. Opening the door and leaving the office, the professor was waiting for her, calling the girl his harem, from which the girl shuddered. The professor found out where the girl was in such a hurry and asked not to forget the girl to look at him later before leaving. Professor Yerem asked, smiling. She just looked at him askance and said nothing. Evening came, and my father returned home, informing Charon about it. The girl, as always, immediately ran to her father in his arms, and a caring young man asked if the girl had dinner without him, hugging his daughter and stroking her head. The girl told her dad that for dinner she warmed up rice and ate it. Looking at the table, the young man saw only a plate of rice and some canned food. This made him think that the girl could not finish eating in this way. Then the mother, when she sees her emaciated daughter, would deal with him in a certain way. These thoughts frightened the young man, and the daughter looked at the frightened father uncomprehendingly, and deciding that this would not do, he decided to dial the phone number. And our hero has not even thought about how to explain everything to his parents, but it seems he had no choice. The young man could not constantly leave his daughter alone, and with shaking hands, he decided to dial his mother's number in order to confess to her what he had not had time to do before. The next day, morning, a phone call and a voice on the phone did not understand why the young man could be late due to family circumstances. Shouting, the voice asked why. The young man considered the laboratory an amusement park. Our hero only listened with his eyes closed to a portion of a nervous scream that poured out on him again. There was a professor on the wire who suggested that the young man simply refused to get a degree. The young man, after listening to all this, told his professor that he was sorry and he would try to come as soon as everything was sorted out quickly. The professor on the other end of the line said that he would personally check what time the young man would come to work. Charon, dressed in a winter jacket, stood nearby and looked at her father. Jihoon was thinking about a project that was already at the final stage and there were no accidents on this occasion. But the professor was still yelling at him and it was very exhausting for the young man. The girl, hearing her father's thoughts aloud, asked why someone was shouting at her father. Then our hero explained to the baby that it was a professor who was teaching him. But the young man made a small mistake. The girl wondered what mistake her father could have made, and the young man asked her not to worry about it. Standing at the traffic light, our hero thought that he had not yet decided how to explain everything to his parents. Maybe they would be scared, but they would not throw him and his daughter out. He thought that in the end he could rely on them. The girl was standing next to her and was angry at the professor who was bothering her father. Having come to visit the young man's parents, the girl greeted her grandparents with a smile and introduced herself as Kim Charon. The boy's parents looked at the girl in horror and did not understand how they had to react. The young man, gathering all his courage, confirmed the words of his daughter that it really was their granddaughter. The mother immediately grabbed the wall, and the father tried to support her, pointing his finger at the girl. He asked if it was really their son's daughter. Jihoon said that he found out about this news himself only 2 days ago, when Ina called him to tell him that Jihoon now has a daughter. Then the parents remembered Ina, with whom the young man met in high school. He confirmed their words and said that when they were on a trip, that's when everything happened that led to the birth of their daughter. Then the parents concluded that Charon was a child conceived on a trip and Ina had been raising her all this time by herself. The young man told this in case his parents did not believe him. The father began to attack his son. It was a blatantly incomprehensible situation for him, where the hero, just listening to the girl after her story, took the child, believing that she was really his daughter. Since all this was true, then the young man had to come with her. Then why did the young man come alone? Ina also told the young man that she has some problems, and our hero has not called the girl since that day. But the young man took a paternity test with him and showed his father, saying that the girl really was his daughter. The father asked to take the child away for something to eat, because the girl looked incomprehensibly at the whole situation. The father wanted to talk to his son alone. Then the father, opening the door to the room, asked his son to follow him. The young man obediently followed his father, and his mother took the girl to breakfast. Calling herself a grandmother, the girl immediately agreed. The father, left alone with his son, asked what he was planning to do now. The young man, of course, planned to raise a girl, because she is his daughter. The father, of course, knew that this was how it was supposed to be, but he asked what the young man would do with it. The girl didn't pick up the phone. The father asked how the girl's name sounded correctly and decided to ask his son if he had brought her to her parents because of the weekend. The young man was not going to the gate and told his father that it was for this reason that he brought his daughter, because he did not have the opportunity to look after the girl while he was in the laboratory. Also, the young man could not feed the child properly, which was very frustrating for the young father. After standing in silence for a minute, the young man was worried about sharing his thoughts with his father. It would be logical if he was kicked out, given that he brought a child who came from nowhere. Jihoon hadn't even got a job yet and couldn't understand at all what he was doing with his life. The father thought it was right. Now was the stage when the young man was worried, and it was not surprising the father answered. The young man's dad also promised that he would help look after his daughter, but it would be better if her mother joined this process as soon as possible. Parents should raise a child together. If a young man is not going to refuse to be hired, then he should live with his mother and raise his daughter. The young man was happy and asked his father if he would accept Charon as his granddaughter. The father looked at the young man, and the answer to his question seemed obvious to the father, and he did it not for the sake of his son, but for the sake of Charon. The young man was overjoyed and bowed to his father and thanked him for his help. The father asked the young man not to relax, thinking that everything was decided. Because of him now this tormented the idea of spending money on the child that he was saving for his son's wedding. The young man was really sorry that everything had turned out this way. The father reassured his son that it was a joke, and the young man could not worry. But if the father continues to worry about it, then the young man could just get married later and return the money back. Our hero smiled and thanked his dad. Charon was recognized as a granddaughter. While getting dressed, Jihoon reported that he would return in the evening and asked his daughter to obey her grandparents, and on weekends she and her father would go to settle somewhere. The girl was obedient and was glad that her father took her somewhere on the weekend, and she asked me to promise the young man on the little finger that he would keep his word. Father and daughter shook each other's little fingers. It was a promise. The father and mother looked at their son, and the happy girl waved goodbye to her father. Today, the young man's steps seemed lighter to him than in those days before when he went to work. The young man ran to work and thought that he was worried that he could not tell his daughter food. But now he could breathe a sigh of relief. It would be the first weekend with Charon, so Dad decided he needed to go to some nice place. The moment that the young man was most worried about was resolved. The young man looked at the phone and chose where they could go with their daughter. There were options for Everland or Lot's World, thinking that the first option had more interesting things and there was more to see. Charon is now truly part of the family. The young man reasoned that before the appearance of his daughter, his weekends existed only to relax at home. And now, looking at the clear sky, our hero smiled and thought that he was looking forward to this weekend. But that evening at work he was informed about the hike. The project was almost completed, which meant that after the New Year's party, it was possible to go camping for the weekend. The staff suggested. Our hero was surprised by this and others did not understand why. The professor suggested this and asked if the young man had plans for the weekend or some family matters, saying that the young man had already taken a day off this week and that he had to solve his problems. The young man, looking nervously at his professor, reported that he already had plans for this weekend. The professor looked at the young man in surprise. Then the young man had to agree that he would go, since he had solved all family matters, he said to the professor through his teeth. The latter, smiling, patted the young man by the shoulders, expecting just such an answer. It was necessary to go on a hike to restore energy. Yerim and Changsu were next to the professor and our hero and also received a question about the trip. Everyone was unhappy, but everyone agreed to go. The professor saw that everyone agreed and, leaving, said that he would be offended if someone spoiled his holiday. Everyone was silently looking in his direction. Everyone had their own plans. Someone was going to watch a movie at the end of the week. Someone was just annoyed, because not everyone as a professor spent time at home on weekends, like him. It was necessary to ask the guys first, as they thought, if they had any plans at all. All the laboratories were furious because of the changeable mood of the professor, but no one was ready to directly resist him. Professor Chan held the future professions of the employees in his hands. No one could do anything about the fact that he needed to relax and go camping. The young man, looking sadly at the phone, thought that he would have to postpone going to the amusement park until next weekend. No one liked the situation that was developing, but the only thing the guys could do was just put up with it. It was so disappointing that it was impossible to refuse such events. Charon would be very upset, his father thought. The young man explained to the girl, already in the evening, that he would not be able to go with her this weekend. While the girl silently looked at her father, he tried to explain to her that the two of them would be able to get there next week and this time for real, because our hero had already booked tickets. The girl stretched out her arms to her father and asked him to hug her. Her father dutifully agreed to her request. The young man asked his daughter if she was upset, but the girl, hugging her father, said that everything was fine with her. It seemed to the young man that the girl did not want to go, but Charon reported that she felt as if her father had to do it and it upset her. Then the hero, looking at his daughter, said that he was fine and did not want the girl to worry about him. It was a good opportunity to practice a little. The daughter was surprised to ask if dad was telling the truth. Charon decided to ask her father that they were going to the mountains because of the uncle who called her father in the morning. The father told the girl that it was his professor and they had just finished the project, so to celebrate its completion, the professor wanted to go camping with everyone. The girl, hugging her father, asked him to come back healthy and that he would not get hurt anywhere. The young man assured his daughter that everything would be fine with him and it was a safe mountain where they were going. He was very pleased that the girl was worried about her father. Charon, hugging her father, flashed her eyes and was angry. In the evening, the young man came out after a shower and looked at the sleeping girl. Today Charon rode the subway and bus for more than an hour. Probably she was tired, our hero thought to himself. The girl was wrapped in a blanket and only her hair was visible. The young man regretted that he could not talk to Charon before going to bed, but there was nothing he could do about it. It was already too late when our hero took her away from her parents. Jihoon climbed into bed and thought that he had just arrived home, went to the shower, and it was already 1 o'clock in the morning on the clock. Sleepy, he thought that if it was only today, then it's okay. But if it continues every day, then transport tickets will cost him more. And the young man also wanted to sort out the kindergarten and decided to leave this issue until tomorrow. At that moment he fell asleep. The little girl, opening her eyes, looked at her father, making sure that he had definitely fallen asleep. She used her magical powers again and wanted to help her father fall into a deep and peaceful sleep. While she was conjuring over him, the young man smiled and the girl, noticing this, was very happy. And now that her father was definitely asleep, she wanted to teach the professor a lesson. Using her power, the little girl climbed into her father's head to read his memories. Professor Chang Dongho's name. He was an old boomer who pretended to be cute, but was actually a sly fox. The girl saw everything that he did in relation to her father. In addition, he was a bad person who pretended to be weak in front of those who are stronger, and stronger in front of those who are weaker. Then the girl remembered the words of her mother, who said that her daughter, having met a two-faced man who oppressed others, could teach him a lesson. However, the girl could not interfere with the causes and consequences when teaching a lesson to this person. A girl could make a man be eaten up by his own vices. Hovering over the bed where her father was sleeping and using her power, she asked where Chang Dongho was now. Having found the professor, she said goodbye to her father out loud and told the sleeping Jian that she would return after teaching the bad uncle how to behave, and with these words the girl disappeared. Once in the room illuminated by moonlight, Charon hovered over the professor's bed and looked at him. It was the same man Chang Dongho who was sleeping sweetly in his bed and did not suspect anything. Then the girl decided to see what sins this man had committed, and, waving her hand, climbed into his head. There were a lot of sins, and the girl wondered what kind of sin she should make bear fruit. After looking at the energy of light, she decided that it was there that she saw what should bring the greatest effect. It was a little annoying that she had to take care of another person, but if it was Dad's pleasure, then she was ready to do it. And she asked her energy to merge with Chang Dongho and another person. Now sin will reach its limit and will soon explode. When the explosion happens, it will hurt a little, but it was better than leaving it to completely fester in the future. And as she was about to leave, the girl thought that she would come to check on the professor a little later. Around the man's body was the energy that the girl brought with her. Mom told her to check people after such manipulations. Returning home, the girl crawled under the covers into bed, where our unsuspecting protagonist was sleeping peacefully. The daughter informed her father that she had returned. And I thought that my father would be really surprised as soon as he found out, although for some time the young man would not guess that his daughter had done it. But when she found out, the girl decided that she would say that it was a surprise and wished good night, fell asleep. Our hero brought his daughter to his grandparents and asked her to play enough. Grandma and Grandpa looked at the father and daughter saying goodbye. The young man hugged the girl and then putting her asked to have fun. Sharon said that she was obedient and Grandma said that Sharon was so wonderful and sweet that the young man did not need to worry about his daughter. The young man was very happy and smiling, looking at his parents and daughter. Still, it was very nice when the child was praised in front of the parent. The young man felt so happy when Sharon was complimented. The mountains were dangerous in winter and everyone asked the young man to be careful, but he left after saying goodbye. It was not at all the weekend that our hero had hoped for. The sad life of a graduate student tied to his professor. Staggering, our hero went his own way and thought about his sad life and the professor, who would again communicate with him in an inappropriate way, and that our hero would have to spend his weekend with him. The professor was collected and thanked everyone for coming so early on his day off. Everyone stood and listened to the professor. Chang Dongho had already offered to enjoy the coolness of the mountain air and show the unity of the members of the laboratory, and now it was necessary to start hiking. One young man, unable to stand it, said after the professor that if he liked it so much, then he could not drag the students with him. Our hero asked his friend to be quiet so that they would not be heard. There were a lot of people and there was not a single breath of cool breeze. It became very stuffy from so many people. Our hero, agreeing with his friend, remembered that they said that the tourism season was now in full swing. Today's hike was quite difficult, and a friend complained to our hero how difficult it was. While Jaehoon believed that it was hard to eat, it was necessary to chat less while they were climbing the mountain. Our hero walked calmly and his friend was surprised that Jaehoon was not tired at all. The young man decided to ask if his friend had been training lately without him. The schedule of both coincided, and our hero asked his friend how he could train without him. A friend could not leave our hero alone and asked if the young man had eaten healthy food alone, because his face had recently become prettier, thereby angering our hero, because he did not do anything like what his friend said. It seemed suspicious to the young man that Jaehoon had changed so dramatically. Then our hero really thought. His body felt light lately, rubbing his neck. He thought that when he woke up earlier, his body ached everywhere. But after the appearance of Charon, the hero felt much better. A picture of his daughter meeting him popped up in his head. Every time Professor Chan took out our hero, he started thinking about Charon and felt like he had his strength back. He wanted to see Charon as soon as possible, and was wondering if his daughter had eaten well. A colleague nearby cursed everything and looked at our hero, who was walking calmly in his thoughts. The friend was disappointed in the young man. He was sure that our hero was hiding something from him, although they had always been together before, and now the young man often smiles to himself. It must be, and without finishing, Jaehoon interrupted his friend and asked him to understand him correctly, because everything was completely wrong. Then the young man asked and said that Jinwoo was not in shape before and that last year he was not like that. During this year alone the guy's stomach grew. Then our hero offered a friend to study at least sometimes, because he was only in his 20s. A friend was sitting on a bench and breathing heavily, telling Jin that the young man was strange. A laboratory rat with such endurance? This is a real scam. The young man replied that he had been like that since birth. Then they heard the professor asking Yerim if the girl was tired and asked her to take her time and get up carefully, but she was silent in response. The young man asked our hero if it seemed strange to him that Yerim's face had become more gloomy lately. Our hero also considered and asked a friend if he knew something. After last year's New Year's party, the girl became like this. Perhaps then she had some problems with the professor. Then the question arose, what could have happened that the girl could have problems with the professor? Then a friend reminded the hero that Nuna was absent after the corporate party, and didn't our young man remember how it all ended that day? The hero recalled that since then the girl was a little unfriendly. Then the young men began to discuss this topic more deeply while sitting on a bench for a break. It was strange that, after leaving the girl, the professor did not say anything, because her departure was unreasonable. Now, if Hyun or a young man had done such a thing, they would have been immediately scolded for such an attitude. Jaehoon agreed with his friend's words. Most likely, the girl got away with everything, because it was somehow connected with him. That's why Chan yelled at the guys not to worry when they asked about Nuna. Jaehoon asked the guy to watch his tongue, because if the professor heard their conversation, the young man would be doomed, because he remembered every strange thing. Then the friend said he would ask Hyun to check it out. Jaehoon, thinking that his friend had gone crazy, asked if he remembered how much he already owed him and ran after the guy running away from him, who shouted that it was all a joke. Stopping at a cafe, everyone decided to drink to the victory of the audience. Now everyone had to empty their raised glasses in one gulp. Drinking after the hike was easy, and the professor decided to make sure of this by asking the students. Yerim sat with a sad face and was silent. The professor sat down next to the girl and asked her to drink with everyone, thereby annoying her. Chang Do-hong was so disgusting that she felt sick. But I had to agree. The girl, holding a glass, asked the professor if he had forgotten his promise. Then the professor, looking at the girl, tried to understand what she was talking about. With an enraged look, she looked at him and he immediately remembered, just decided to make fun of the girl. But waving it off, he said that he remembered everything. Grabbing the girl by the hand, he told her that he would find a place so that she could study abroad and make her a professor upon her return. At the same time, he smiled and looked at the girl. Yerim was shaking from the situation and the professor's behavior. She knew that he had to keep this promise. The girl said that she would have to take measures. The professor thought she was threatening him, but the girl said that was not the case. After all, the professor himself told her that he would block the way if she told about it. Thinking about how disgusting Cha Do-hun was, he asked to keep himself in hand because she had to. But today she couldn't cope with her emotions. The professor asked the girl to be honest with him. He would keep his promise and therefore she should not hide anything from him. And the girl said she would be honest now. This reaction surprised him very much. Our little Charon stood and controlled her energy in her hands, asking to be patient a little, even if it was very hard. It will hurt at first, but everything will get better soon. The next day our hero found out that the professor had been summoned to the prosecutor's office. And immediately there was a question for what? Then a friend told me that after a hike that took place on the weekend, Jang Dongho behaved impermissibly towards Yerim Nuna. The young man, hearing this statement, was insanely surprised, because he would never have thought of such a thing. The young man considered the professor one of those who knows the limits of what is permissible, but still the professor violated them. That's why Yerim was so nervous. The young man hoped that everything was fine with the girl. A friend interrupted Jahoon's thoughts and told the young man that they needed to report to me on the completion of the project. Then our hero suddenly remembered about the project. The hero believed that the report would no longer be needed, because the Hatch company gave them the project only because of the professor, and now there was no point in finishing it. The friend was also worried, because he had spent so many nights on the project and now they didn't know what the wallpaper guys had to do. Even if Professor Chan did not contribute to the study, he was the one who was assigned this project. Without a supervisor, all the work will go to waste. After looking at the mood of the guys, which was completely spoiled, the young man was upset. Then a guy came up to him and said that the dean was looking for a young man. Our hero was certainly surprised, but no one knew why he was called and the young man had to go. Having come to the dean, the young man was asked if he had heard about Professor Chan. The young man answered positively to the question, because before coming to the dean's office, he was told about what had happened to the professor. A man sitting in an armchair and sipping coffee told the young man that as far as he knew, the current project carried out by the young man's team was almost completed. Our hero told the dean that it only remained to organize a presentation for the project. But the professor interrupted the dean without finishing the young man with a request to finish everything to the end and present his project. The answer shocked our hero. Then the man asked if Jahoon was the senior in the laboratory, and since the professor finished very badly, now the young man had to take responsibility and complete the work. It couldn't be that the dean didn't know that a commercial company had ordered an industrial project from the university, the young man thought. Their opponents also fought for the first place in the financial world. The young man wanted to object, but the dean reported that he had contacted Hatch for their sake and asked to report to him when the young man's team was finished. The dean also asked not to worry and to do everything in the best way. As always, our hero was already barely standing on his feet because of nerves and only agreed with him. Standing in front of his classmates, the young man reported that the dean wanted our hero to defend the results of the project and finish it. All the guys were surprised and asked if it was true. Because the rector's election was coming soon, the hero's friend thought that the dean wanted to present the project under his own name and thereby strengthen your reputation. Everyone fought together, it made sense, and everyone nodded to each other. Since the dean undoubtedly wanted to take the position of rector, our hero could understand his actions. And our hero thought about the fact that he was required to simply state everything well. A friend asked if our hero could do everything without complaints, and if he started to stutter, the dean would not let him get away with it, so he had to make sure that he took medication. The young man fell down and told Hyun that he couldn't just hit him to make fun of him. Our hero took the rest of the staff away smiling sweetly and offered the guys to finish the project. They had wasted the whole morning and now their schedule was pretty tight. Since the report was due to be submitted tomorrow, they needed to work hard. Jaehoon, full of enthusiasm, wanted to end this. In the evening, our hero took his daughter and asked if she had a good day and whether she obeyed her grandparents. The girl said that she was obedient and ate a lot of delicious food. Dad was very happy and wanted to apologize to the girl for being late. They walked down the street and held hands. The daughter happily replied that Sharon understood everything because her father was working. Dad explained to the girl that tomorrow he had to go to a big company called Hatch, so he had to work late to finish everything. The girl asked what our hero would do there. Then the father explained to the girl that he would present the work he was doing there. Sharon had to cheer for her father so that he could do well. The girl smiled and agreed. When our hero came home, he fell asleep, and his daughter thought, what was she supposed to do? Then she used magic jars for her father to make him feel confident in tomorrow's presentation. After using everything, the girl decided that one of them should definitely help her father. I added a little knowledge, confidence, and even charm. It will also not be superfluous, the girl thought. But by mistake I added too much, and I wondered if everything would be fine with my father after that. The father was sleeping peacefully, and the girl, having finished pouring all her magic jars into him, wished him good night, and, satisfied with her work, also climbed into bed under the blanket to Dad and hoped that her mistake would not harm her father, but only help even more, because what could have happened, Sharon thought. In the morning, the father asked the girl how he looked, because he had not worn anything like this for a long time and therefore felt awkward. The girl praised her father, saying that he looked simply inimitable and smiled at him with her charming smile. And the young man was ready, even though he was thinking in his head that he was still so nervous yesterday. But now he was full of confidence that he could do anything today. Our hero was standing in a gorgeous black suit, which suited him very well. Standing in front of the company building, the young man thought that he was already here, but for the first time he came here alone and therefore was very nervous. Standing in front of the doors of the building, he thought that it was worth listening to chants and taking a sedative. But when he calmed down, he decided that he just had to perform well. Previously, he had seen Chief Young perform and therefore everything should have been fine. Our hero, straightening his tie and holding onto his bag, went into the building. Remembering his smiling daughter, who believed in her father, he felt better, and since Sharon believed in him, Jaehoon decided that he would hold on confidently and give his best at today's presentation 100%. The hero was met by a girl who said that the boss would be there soon. The girl also explained that the boss would like to come in person and therefore the young man had some time to prepare before his arrival. Jaehoon, hearing what the girl told him, was taken aback and stood looking at her questioningly. Jaehoon, smiling nervously, told the girl that all this was nothing, and he had prepared well, so there was no need to prepare. Having asked the girl to print out the materials from the flash card, he handed it to the girl. The same one saw how the hero was shaking and wondered if everything was all right with him. The young man was out of order and in his heart he was crying why exactly the boss was going to come today. Our hero decided that he was definitely doomed. We should still drink a sedative, our hero thought, and regretted that he did not do it from the very beginning, thinking that he was waiting for a failure, and even in the morning he had some strange confidence. Standing and sorting out his materials for the presentation, our hero shed tears and thought that if the boss came, then so would everyone else, which means if our hero screwed up, then his life would be ruined. Then his thoughts were interrupted by the young man, seeing that Jaehoon was standing here. It was the boss Young, and our hero heard from the boss that in such a difficult time, our hero wanted to ask what he meant. But the young man said that he would tell later. The fighting spirit was broken even before it all started, our hero thought. It also seemed to him that he did not remember anything that he had to do. Meanwhile, the employees were sitting in their seats while our hero cursed everything in the world and worried about the upcoming presentation. People started coming to the hall, and our hero only thought that it was unnerving for the young man to perform in front of someone whom even Professor Chan had never seen before. Here some man, sitting in a chair looking at our hero with a dissatisfied look, firmly said that he could start his presentation. The man's aura was even more powerful than the one our hero saw on the news. Our hero had such a feeling that he would be kicked out if he stuttered a little. And thinking to himself what will happen, our hero decided to start the performance by informing everyone present in the hall, thereby drawing attention to himself. After starting his speech and then finishing it and thanking everyone for listening to him, our hero finished. The conference room was very quiet, no one said anything and only looked at the young man. Then our hero thought that he had screwed up. He tried to remember what mistakes he had made, but he couldn't remember what he had said at all. Whatever happened, Jaehoon hoped it would end soon. The man only asked the young man to introduce himself, then Jaehoon started talking about the name of the project. But the man was not asking about the name of the project, because he was not blind and was able to read from the slide. He wanted to know about something else, namely the name of the presenter. Jahoon was scared. He didn't understand why the man asked him his name and then introduced himself. The man asked Kim Jahoon to tell about any achievements and failures of the project. The young man said that 95% of the indicators achieved based on the set goal could be called successful. What were the main aspects that led to the final result? The young man told about 3 main ones. The first one was a reaction to room temperature. As he just started, the man evaluating him smiled, and our hero noticed it. The young man beamed and thought that if the man smiled, then it was a good moment. At that, he stood up with the words that he only needed to hear this moment. And the boss left. Everyone said goodbye to him, and our hero stood, literally crumbling into 1,000 small fragments from what was happening, which shocked him. Jahoon thought it was a failure and he was gone. Looking at what was happening, the young man thought that the boss's smile meant something good, but perhaps it was a deceptive hope. He just took it and left like that. Our hero thought he was finished. Then someone called him. It was the rest of the staff, praising the young man for his performance. They told the guy that they had a good opinion and most likely the boss too. The young man was not encouraged by the words of his boss's colleague, because he left, but looking at the other employees who remained in their places, he noticed that everyone was in a good mood. The reactions were so different that the young man was completely confused and did not understand whether it was good or bad. One of the employees said that they had to introduce a new technology based on the results of the study as soon as possible. If they act in accordance with the documentation, they will be able to beat competitors in terms of price. In this case, how will they return the invested funds? The woman, looking at her colleague, asked if he just wanted to throw the money away. First of all, they needed to reimburse the costs, and the costs at the moment were not so important. One employee told a colleague, and they quarreled among themselves about future plans. Our hero, watching this, thought that the employees were arguing about the internal affairs of the company, and did not understand whether he could be present at this. But only our hero thought about it, as a man wanted to know the opinion of the presenter on this issue, what he thought about it, and the young man was surprised that his opinion was decided to ask. Here the man apologized to the young man, scratching his head guiltily. Because Jahoon was not their employee, he just forgot about it, because the young man was standing among them and looked like an employee of the company. The guy sitting next to me was of the same opinion. The nervous look of the young man reminded them of the times when they were at a performance and were new employees of the company. Someone remembered their first presentation in front of the boss. Now this employee was on good terms with him, because he had known him for a long time. Jahoon thought to himself about what it meant that he didn't look like a kitten, and was grateful that the company's employees liked him. One of the employees suggested to the boss Jan to escort the guest, because he was in charge here, because everyone present. So, forced the young man to stand for too long, got up and, agreeing with the woman, decided to escort our hero, who was too exhausted by the presentation and glad that he could finally leave. The boss Yang decided to calm the young man down and said that the young man was really shaking. But Jan liked everything. The young man performed well in front of the boss, did not even stutter too much. Yang thought Jahoon was reserved, but his presentation made the boss change his mind. The young man thanked for the excellent words, but then Jan stunned the guy by saying that the company decided to abandon this project. The young man was crushed, because it turned out that everything they said before was just empty compliments, why he was so unlucky, and what kind of injustice society was. Yang asked Jahoon not to be upset, saying that everything went well. The young man looked at the boss uncomprehendingly, and then the boss Yang mentioned about the words he had previously said before the presentation. The company was going to move its activities to the school. Therefore, boss was so angry that he came in person. But Chief Yang didn't want to talk about it anymore and told the young man everything he could, patting him on the shoulders. The guy looked at Ian blankly. In addition to all the boring conversations, Jan wanted to ask our hero something. Whether Jahoon had plans to study abroad. The young man replied that at the moment he had no such plans. Then Yan, holding out his hand to the young man, invited him to join the company. The young man was surprised it was all similar to the recruitment he had heard about. Yang asked Jahoon to listen to him carefully and not misunderstand him. Hatch specialists were not so easy to get because of the high competition. The young man knew that they were talking about professional agents. Yang didn't know why, but the boss liked Jahoon, and therefore, if he was looking for a job in his specialty, then he was offered to consider the company. The young man was grateful. Jan also asked to thank the boss for such an opportunity. The young man performed well today and they wished him a happy journey home. In response, the young man also wished a good job and went home with thoughts about a strange day in which the weight was tumbling. The young man could not believe that the boss liked him. Then the thought occurred to him that someone might have cast a spell on him. Soon things went like clockwork. The hero thought that strange thoughts visited him, because magic did not exist in the modern world, and smiling, he thought that from time to time there were good days. His phone rang and he looked into the phone and did not understand what it was. Looking at his phone, the hero saw in front of his father in the amount of 1.5 million won. The girl sent money for the maintenance of Charon's, which the girl talked about last time. The young man planned to return home with a fried chicken to take away, but with this money he could go somewhere to eat. Thinking about the fact that I didn't even stay at work and that today I can have a great time, Jaehoon decided to bring the whole family to the restaurant to eat. Mother and father were pleasantly surprised, but they also found it strange, and they thought that something had happened at the university. The restaurant had high prices, and the parents asked the young man if everything was fine. The hero told that he decided to bring everyone to the restaurant because the project was finished today, and he received money, so everything was fine. Charon sat next to her father and smiled. The money was sent by Charon's mother for food, the young man told his parents. The girl cut a steak, and Grandpa decided to ask who taught the girl this. She replied that it was Mom. The grandmother looked at her granddaughter and said that Charon was very diligent, and she worked hard on raising the girl. And I decided to remember about my son, who broke plates in childhood. How could they be so different? The woman wondered. The young man thought that Charon took after her mother, and the girl looked at her dad and drank her drink. In fact, our hero was a little annoyed that Charon was not like her father in anything. Thinking about this, he looked at the girl who was smiling at her father, but he didn't care about the resemblance. He only knew that it was his daughter, who always smiled at him and was his support in everything. Jaehoon, sitting at a large table with everyone, thanked his parents for looking after the girl these couple of days, and said that they would not have to do this anymore. Parents anxiously asked their son why he spoke about it so sharply and what happened. The young man recalled that the problem with Professor Chan, which he had previously mentioned, had escalated and therefore the professor should not have returned to the university. In the laboratory without him, the young man did not see any sense to stay. Mom asked Jaehoon if this would affect the fate of the professor in his situation. The young man said that everything would be fine and he was not going to get a doctorate. He just wanted to finish his master's degree and do technical research. The father considered his son's idea wise, as long as there were no problems on his way. Mom also believed that everything should have worked out for the young man. Both parents nodded to their son and looked at him. The young man smiled and told his parents that now that he had Charon, he had to live responsibly. Therefore, I asked my parents not to worry so much. It was late evening, and our hero was walking home with his daughter. Along the way, the young man asked the girl how her days with her grandparents had gone. The girl told her dad that it was very good, and grandma cooked a lot of goodies for the girl. Dad asked the girl with resentment in his voice that she apparently liked living with his parents more than with him. The girl, holding Dad's hand, smiled sweetly and replied that she liked it most with Dad. The young man immediately sparkled from the answer of his child. Taking the girl in his arms, he told Charon that he also liked being with Charon the most and lifting her around laughing. Then Charon touched our hero's glasses and decided to ask Dad if he was comfortable in them. Smiling, the father replied that it was certainly inconvenient. Then the girl asked why the father wore them. Jaehoon replied that he needed to study a lot and therefore had to wear glasses. Then the girl was reassured by this answer. After putting his daughter on his arm and going home, our hero told his daughter that she was so worried that he would be comfortable, and for this the hero was very proud of his daughter. Charon replied that Jaehoon was her father and of course she was worried about making him comfortable, and he felt good. The winter was cold, like all the previous ones, but thanks to Charon, this winter was filled with warmth. The investigation into the case of Professor Chan Dongho progressed quickly because Yerim gathered evidence. The student council went on the offensive after hearing about the professor. Everyone spoke with signs on which they wrote that they wanted the professor to be punished, and that he was fired. There were no more courses he taught. Technically, the professor was fired. Thanks to this, Jaehoon and Charon had a relaxing break. It was morning, and father and daughter were discussing where they could go tomorrow. The girl asked about the amusement park, and the young man replied that this event was waiting for them tomorrow, while the daughter smiled at her father, as always. Jaehoon was also smiling and talking about how tomorrow he and Charon could have a good time and have fun, because the weather was also promised to be good. Only after talking about the weather outside the window, a downpour poured down, and the young man was upset, jumping out of bed. A downpour in the middle of winter just couldn't go. The girl asked what they would do if the rain didn't stop until tomorrow. Our hero decided to get into the weather forecast and saw that it had been changed. The phone showed that heavy rains were expected due to a sudden decrease in atmospheric pressure. Then the father informed the girl that they would not be able to go anywhere because of the weather. The girl said that there was no time for this and it was necessary to pray, and folding her palms, the girl began to pray for good weather. Serious Charon said that if they prayed to the rain spirit together, then the weather would get better. The young man looked at his serious daughter and thought that praying to the rain spirit was, of course, nice, but it would hardly help to change the weather. If the prayers had worked, he would have won the lottery at least 100 times already. Here the girl, looking up from her prayer, looked at the sad father and asked why he did not pray with her. At the moment she asked him to put his hands together and pray like her. Then the girl stood up and confidently asked Dad to repeat after her. The little girl stood with her eyes closed and pressed her palms together. It was necessary to say the following words for the prayer: Rain spirit, please don't come tomorrow. Looking at the girl, the young man folded his hands and began to pronounce the words. So they stood together in front of the window, and our hero thought to himself that whether these words would work. He did not want Charon to get upset. The next day came, and the girl was already waking up her father, asking him to wake up as soon as possible. She stood by the young man's bed and asked him to get up quickly to look with him at what she saw. The young man looked at his daughter and realized that the alarm clock had not rung yet. Getting out of bed, our hero looked questioningly at his daughter, who, as always, was full of energy, and asked the young man to get up quickly and go to where she was standing, and quickly. Jahoon couldn't understand what his daughter wanted to show him so much. Looking out the window, he saw snow falling, and the girl happily asked her father how he liked snow. It was better than rain. It really wasn't raining, and Jahoon was looking out the window in surprise. The girl also went to the window and told Dad that her words about prayer were true. They prayed together and it worked. The rain stopped coming in the morning. The hero thought about how great it was, because nothing had happened before when he was praying. Our hero believed that this became possible because the air temperature dropped and the water became snow. Looking at Charon, the young man thought that he had a feeling that everything was going too well lately, although he didn't care about it. Then he suggested Charon to wash up and go out early. There should have been traffic jams on the roads because of the snow. The girl, as always, answered her father with a smile. The young man thought that he and his daughter would have a lot of time to have fun. Charon was smiling,